And it looks like we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Hangout. So, many of you might be familiar with the claims that Anthony Riley and Nathan Oakley made regarding Anthony's footage as seen from St. Bees, and his claims that he's able to see the Isle of Man and also Ireland from there. Seeing Ireland from there is pretty much impossible. And we're going to debunk this a little bit further tonight. And tonight with me, I have TheRumpus's here, who will give his awesome presentation regarding the observations that Riley made. Hello, Rumpus.
Hello, Alex.
All right, so I think without further ado, I'll just present you, and then we can start.
Right, thanks. Oh, my God, yeah. This is, I've been a bit stressed out because I managed to lose half my files early today. My computer decided to misbehave. So anyway, yes, but nonetheless, I managed to get there. And first of all, I'd like to thank, when I'm doing this, I've had some resources provided to me by, well, Alex has helped me, George Natayuk, and Miles Davis. I'm going to forget them if I don't mention them all here, aren't I? Hal Soy, Paul Voigt, Dr. Johners, and Jem Panda, and Al K. Right, so, God, this has been a bit of a panic. Yeah, so there's a few rough bits in this, and I haven't been able to. I was hoping to present an Excel spreadsheet of these, all the interesting points, and then give you all the any discrepancies and things that were on there. Right, so I just want to. So this is just give the whole story here. So I'm going to try and make this a comprehensive thing, going from the very start to the very end, covering almost all the issues that have been raised that have any sense whatsoever. And I'm not familiar with anything that may have happened in the last 2 or 3 days because I haven't been looking. But basically, I'm hoping to cover all of the claims being made. Anyway, so for people who are completely unfamiliar with this, Anthony Riley went to St. Bees. This is the UK here, and he went to this place here called St. Bees in Cumbria, and he had a look at the Isle of Man. He went there to supposedly do something else, but he ended up taking a video of the Isle of Man, and he went to these cliffs. And there's some dispute where he was, but you can see that's a cliff.
Rumpus, we can't hear you anymore. At least I can't. The same stuff happening again as the last time with Spurs. I'm not able to hear you. It might be your computer again. This is a bad sign. I'm not able to hear you. Yep, he dropped. All right. I'm not actually sure what I'm gonna do now. I hope that he will respond to my Skype message that I've sent him, and that he can rejoin. Because if this wouldn't work today, this would be really annoying. Hello.
Sorry, but yes, my machine crashed there. That was annoying.
All right, that's what I suspected.
When I may have to reboot. What was the last thing I said?
The last thing you said, you were presenting Riley footage from, or a photo from that cliff. At least for me. I don't know if the chat saw it. Right. Yeah, the last thing, apparently the last thing you showed to the chat or the Hangout was a picture of the cliff where Riley was standing on.
Right. Sorry, yes, I should have rebooted my computer before I did all this. Yes, which I didn't. I've been a bit. Sorry, I'm clicking the wrong thing. yeah, my
Just take your time. Hello? Did you leave again? All right, so the Rumpus has just sent me a message. He's going to reboot his computer, so that will take a minute or two, maybe 3, I don't know. As soon as he's back, he will continue his presentation. Until then, if you guys have any questions for me or for the Rumpus, please just send them to me in the live chat. I will save them for later, and if they are necessarily have to be asked immediately, I will immediately send them to the Rumpus so he can answer them. Otherwise, until he is back, I have just reached 500 subscribers. So thank you everybody for that. I will have a celebration hangout next Saturday where we will be probably playing Cards Against Humanity or something. So if you're looking forward to that one, it would be nice if you could join then. Oh no, I will not sing. My singing voice is really shitty. I mean, you can hear my speaking voice and singing. I'm even worse in that. So no, I definitely won't sing. At least not when I'm sober. This is a really weird feeling. I mean, there are 80 of you watching this right now, and all that's happening is me having a interrupted monologue. Part-time vegan, you're in the chat. If you still want to do the hangout, please send me a message again. I think we could make one for next week or the week after that. I would have time. If you still want to do this. Hell, so you're watching porn at the same time? Okay. That's fine, but I guess also a little bit disturbing thinking about the fact that you're probably fapping to my voice. Yeah, Sean, I'm gonna give him a second chance. I mean, one fuck up can happen. That's no problem. I had to reschedule the hangout since I had a cold on the first time we agreed on. So yeah, shit happens, I guess. Oh, you want me to say I'll be back? Okay, I'll be back. I will not do this in an Arnold voice, though. Thanks, John Michelson. I appreciate it. The Rumpus is back. I am in the hangout. Rumpus, I maybe have to send you another invite. Give me a second. Well, Edward, of course I don't have an Austrian accent. I'm not from Austria. I'm from Franconia, which is northern half of Bavaria. So no, obviously I don't have the same accent as Schwarzenegger. And the Rumpus is back. Hello.
Hello, Alex. Sorry about that. Oh God, it's just not been my day for tech stuff today.
All right, shit happens. Let me just share your screen again, and then we can continue.
Thank you.
All right, there we go.
Am I sharing correctly?
It looks like you're sharing. Yes. Give me just a second so I can see this in the live stream. Yes, it's working.
Oh, sorry. God, bloody hell. Right, okay. I think I've rebooted my computer. It should be happy now. Right, so back to this. Yes, so there's a picture of the Isle of Man from St. Bees, and we can see that Anthony captured these two images, and this caused him to get very excited and think that he'd found some proofs for a flat Earth, because he was things you shouldn't be able to see on a thing. I probably should really just show briefly one of his videos on this subject. While I just give people just in case there are people new here not familiar at all, just a quick sample of his video. So that's going to involve a quick. So this is what we. Quick sample of what we're dealing with. Right, okay. Let me just screen grab, get this going. Oh dear. Right. Hopefully, can you see us these Anthony Riley in the screen being screen grabbed there? Alex, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I muted my microphone.
God, right. Yes. So
fine. I don't know if we will be able to hear the audio though. That depends.
No, I'm not. No, we're not going to need to see the audio.
See the audio.
Let's hear the audio. Yeah, we want me to hear the audio. That's fine. That's not.
All right.
Right. Can we go, please? Why are we not? That's because I'm not on the right thing. Oh God. Right. So this is the video. This is the first video he took about 2 months ago. One of three, in fact, he took, and this gets, you get a little flavour here. He identifies this. I'm a little bit further on. And then he starts making a few claims about here. Right, here we go. So there's the Isle of Man he's found, and he's panning to the right here. There's that little blob that I was showing you earlier that was reflected, and he then pans to the right to find this island-like looking like thing. This is from a slightly lower position. This is the first video in which he was slightly lower than the second, and he's then found these islands to the right, which of course, being a flat earther, he doesn't understand the concept of he doesn't understand because he doesn't believe that things can be hidden by the curve. He thinks there's nothing there, then it can't be behind the curve, therefore it must be an island. There's nothing joining the two. Obviously the sort of logic that a flat earther would use. And so he says, oh look, I found this thing that's not connected to the Isle of Man, and if it's not connected to the Isle of Man, what is it? And so he then presumes it must be something else, and he then comes to some dramatic conclusions, and then he's found a bit more land even to the right of that as he goes further to the right. There we go. And so over here, further to the right there, he's getting more blobs of land. So he's thinking that because it's disconnected from the Isle of Man, therefore they must be seeing something on that bearing, and the only thing on that bearing is Ireland, which is hundreds of miles away. And so there we are, there's a claim there. The Isle of Man stops there, and so he then starts claiming it might be Scotland, or he changes his mind to Ireland, etc., etc. Right, well, okay, that's all we really need to see of that. And then we go back to, and there's another video he took of where he. God damn, where's my. Right. Whew. Right. So those are some clips here from that video. This is the one you saw where it says the Isle of Man stops there, and they pan to the right, and he says, what the fuck is this land over here? And of course, according to him, obviously it can't be the Isle of Man because there's a gap between it, and the only thing can be on that line, that bearing, is some other piece of land, and the only one he can think of when he follows it in Google Earth is something in Northern Ireland, which is many hundreds of miles away. And of course, according to the spherical Earth model, if you do the calculations, that will be below the curve. So he's seeing something above the curve that shouldn't be there. He should be below the curve, and so therefore he thinks, aha, I have proof now of the spherical Earth model is incorrect, and therefore, gosh, let's go off to the fish and chip shop and celebrate, presumably. And though this is the this is the lump of land immediately to the right here that you saw. After a little bit of an encounter with the spherical realists, he then modified his claim somewhat, saying, "Ah, well, now this is a clip from a second video. Sorry, a clip from a subsequent video, not of not the. I don't think it's the second. He took 3 videos in total of the view from there. I don't know which video this particular bit was from. But anyway, he's making a new claim now, just with this clip, saying, "Oh, now he's saying, oh, well, perhaps that might be the bit of Isle of Man," because to him the only evidence that counts is whether it looks correct, and this what in fact will turn out to be Shellac Point. Even he accepts it really does look rather like a bit of the Isle of Man, so he's given up here. But he says, well, okay then, why are we being able to see this? So he's accepted this is a bit of Isle of Man, and over here it's still not. He thinks it's sort of overlapping in the background, etc., etc., and it's too high to be the Isle of Man. So he's still thinking this is Ireland now. He's modified his claim, but it makes an interesting one quote from him down here. "I maintain my position. I've never once changed any part of my story other than for the sake of discussion." And there's a link there if you wish to go and link there. So either he doesn't watch his own videos, or he's changed his mind about whether he changes his mind. And he's now no longer making the same claim that he was here, because he's saying the Isle of Man stops there, and now he's saying it doesn't, it stops here. So, okay, people are allowed to change their mind, but what you're not allowed to do is to say you don't change your mind and then change your mind. And that's much the same thing I've already said. And on the left-hand side of the Isle of Man, him and a number of the other flat earthers have made some claims. And there's some links here about the fact that on the other side, here we go, here's another claim here, we're seeing on both sides of the Isle of Man, because on the other side, or they later modified that to be, well, if it's not the Isle of Man on the left-hand side over here, so this area over here, they think they've identified bits of it that are very, very far away from on the southern part of the Isle of Man. And if you can see that, that's as bad as it being an island, because that should also be behind the curve. So they've got several claims going on. You can see bits of Ireland, or you can see bits of the Isle of Man that are so far away on the southern side, you shouldn't be able to see that either. So in some cases, they don't care about whether it's a bit of Ireland or not. In some cases, on the right-hand side, they do, because that's a very close bit. So here's the Isle of Man. These are the features we're going to be interested in. So as you may remember, the viewpoint is over to the right, the sort of northeast of here, and this is the Shellac Point. That's the cliff face that we were just having a look at just now, and you'll see that's moved. It's already moved about. At one point, it was in Ireland and Scotland, and now it's come back to Ireland. Come back to the Isle of Man. So that's a well-travelled cliff. This is another interesting point, the Moorgold Lighthouse. That's the nearest point to the viewpoint, and it features in that's quite a story behind that one. And this Ballachanal place is somewhere you need to really focus on, because this town moves around like crazy every few weeks, according to the flat earthers, and we've been identifying where it is, but they have re-identified it, identified it, and misidentified it repeatedly. And this is a rather important point. This is Clay Head, which is, I hope to show you, is the leftmost part of the picture of the image here. That's over here. So right over on the left-hand side. Though I don't know what height this was taken from, but it looks similar. But what we'll do is we'll actually use a composite of the video that Anthony took to generate a complete image of what of the complete pan in the video, and will hopefully identify this clay head is in fact the leftmost part. But they believe that they're seeing all the way down to this Langness lighthouse and golf club on the St. Michael's Island down here. So those are and Douglas here as well. They believe they can see, and they regularly misidentify or misplace Douglas for Bala-Canal as well. It's one of the many places that swap over with Bala-Canal in their minds, which of course you can't see because I say the leftmost point is that. But these are those. They would love to see Douglas. That's why I put down his. If there's one place they would love to be able to see, it would be Douglas on that picture. So they really would like to see that. Right. So here are some of the claims that they're making. So for a start, so there's Douglas. They're claiming is visible in the video, which shouldn't be possible. This peninsula near Castletown, which is the St. Michael's Island here, they're saying they can see on the left-hand side. Parts of Ireland on the left-hand side as well, and the mountains on the northern part of the island are either they're too low. The north part of the Isle of Man is too low, so the only thing it can be is Northern Ireland, because there are some mountains on the same bearing in the distance, and we'll be investigating that. And it's quite an interesting thing. In fact, Anthony might be quite pleased with some of the results for that. So that's also claimed. So he's claiming that the images we saw on the right aren't just made up of Isle of Man. They're made up of an overlay of Northern Ireland because he started to realise that bits of it were the Isle of Man. And yes, and specifically the Isle of Man parts to the right of that shell-like point. So he's claiming that this, again, we saw that there. This is the shell-like point again. So again, he's saying that the Isle of Man effectively stops there, and from that point onwards, it's either Ireland or Scotland, or it varies depending on which day of the week it is, which particular. It's going to be Iceland before long, and then one of the key things that the stronger claims is that various elements in the picture, lots of points, are much higher above the horizon than they should be for a spherical Earth model. So they're going to say, look, the lighthouse is much higher up than it should be. We shouldn't be able to see that. Should be under the curve. And they'll be saying lots of things that should be under the curve that we can see. We've already mentioned on the left-hand side that we're seeing. They're claiming that we're seeing, if not Ireland, bits of the Isle of Man that are so far away they should be under the curve. So there's a general theme that lots of things are much higher up than they should be, much more visible. We shouldn't be seeing them. So that's definitely a strong claim that we need to tackle. Then of course we've got this Langness Lighthouse and Golf Club visible, which was instead up here. It's so far away because we're up here. It should be below the curve. So that's another strong claim there. And so that's yes. And there's a tuft of trees, a rather famous tuft of trees that they believe is above Douglas, or at least when we investigated, it turned out to be a shrubbery where Anthony claimed it was. But I don't know whether that claim is so hot now. But certainly they're claiming it's close to Douglas. Right, and now so those are the claims about the video, about the features in the video. Now, there are a lot of associated claims to do with the physics and the maths and other things that they make as well. So, for instance, they called in a 3D modeling guy who turned out to be a complete imbecile who tried to model this, the 3D. He managed to get hold of a LiDAR map of the Isle of Man, which has a very high resolution. And I tried to get hold of it as well, but failed because it's quite expensive. And he then tried to put the Isle of Man in a 3D model and try to position things according to the video, the identification of the features in there. So he tried to position the camera where he thought the images suggested they were, and then he tried to work out, tried to make a compatible, and he couldn't. He failed, and on the grounds that he failed, he said, "Oh, it can't be sphere either." Well, we'll see how that gets on. And then the claim is that refraction has a negligible effect on the apparent vertical position of objects. And anyway, you can spot refraction because it's very obvious. So if everything looks okay, it can't be being refracted is their basic argument. So they try to ignore the case of refraction. And they stopped. What have I got here? Refraction is an issue. Yeah, I can't remember what that is about there. There's some refraction issue. I can't forget now. Okay, the drop, yes, and then amazingly, the 3D imbecile guy told Anthony and several other flat earthers that drop is the value they should be interested in, and they can throw away this thing called the hidden variable, which I'll be going into some detail later, about what you should be using to make measurements and come to an evaluation. The point is, this idiot, he seems to be some sort of surveying guy, and so he doesn't worry about what you're looking at. He just worries about trying to keep things in line. And so he clearly wasn't familiar, I think, with the concept of the hidden variable. He just understood drop because that's a well-known surveying term. And so he just said, well, I don't think he'd ever heard of hidden. So he just said, when asked by Anthony, what value should we be using? He said, a drop or something else. He just, I think, just recognized the word drop and said, yeah, we'll go with that. Not recognizing what we're doing here is a visual process in which we're trying to identify things relative to the horizon. We'll be going into that in some detail. And then there is another claim here that Anthony made. He made 3 videos, one of which he claimed was made lower down, and he gave a height for that, which was wrong. And then there's a second video that he claimed was just a little quite close or somewhat close to the first video, which turned out it wasn't. And in fact, then he admitted that the third video maybe was at the very top of those cliffs that I showed you earlier. We'll be going to some detail as to how high exactly he is. Anthony, gradually, as he's been provoked, has gradually admitted to being higher and higher and higher. And now he's even pointed at the area that that we identified some weeks ago in the spherical Earth side as to where he was, and he's sort of given up that and actually admitted to just what we are. So I won't be going into that so much detail, but we need to confirm, because he's still fighting. He's still offering silly values for his height, and so and as we'll see, the observer height is absolutely crucial to what you think you can see. Because of course, what we're looking at here, Anthony's made a video. He's looking at what things he can see. So we've got to make sure that what he can see is compatible with spherical Earth theory. So everything about to drop and everything else is irrelevant. We've got a visual image piece of evidence he's using to make a claim, and so we need to see if the spherical Earth is compatible with the spherical with his video image. And then we've got some marvelous stuff here that's kind of investigating. That someone called Ranty, who seems to have taken on the role of the photo analyst for the flat earthers, has come up with a theory that moving the zoom control on the camera is equivalent to moving the camera. This is born of his frustration at not being able to get Google Earth to provide a panorama. Anybody who's tried to use Google Earth to do this will know that it's very difficult to get something that looks like a zoomed in image. It doesn't offer a zoom in option very easily. It's extraordinarily difficult to get at it. And so because of that, he decided the only way, because clearly the only thing he knows about is Google Earth, and in frustration decided to do what he could do, which was to move in the Google Earth model closer to the object, and then he decided to make his photo analysis from there, with disastrous results leading to what I would call possibly the most embarrassing image on the internet. I don't know, there may be some additional claims they may be making. So anyway, so here's the situation with headings. Now, what you can do, obviously, is identify the headings of objects that you're interested in. And here, for instance, I've got a heading to Douglas here, which is 236. You measure heading, so here's north up here. I've arranged this orientation correctly, and that's 236.76 heading towards the dock, the port in Douglas there. And you can see all these other headings that you would have if you wanted to look at things like the lighthouse or Ramsey, or the lighthouse we were discussing, and this infamous Bala Canal, and these the tuft of trees and the lighthouse. So there's a number of bearings that you know are going to be required. If you're going to want to look at something on the Isle of Man, you're going to have to use these bearings. And when you do draw a line between two things, and as a scale here of 20 kilometers, yes, that's useful to know that that's the sort of the scale we're working with here. Now, when you do draw a straight line between two things on the surface of the Earth, you get a great circle. That line between two points is on a great circle, and that a great circle is basically something that's of the diameter and circumference and centered on the center of the Earth. So having drawn a great circle for the two lines from St. Bees on the left-hand side, we've got St. Bees here. There's a distance between St. Bees and Douglas of 68.4 kilometers. I've got the coordinates here. And this is what it looks like to scale. So I'm going to be trying to do things to scale quite often where I can. Unfortunately, because I lost 2 or 3 hours work, unfortunately, I haven't been able to do as much as I wanted to. But the separation in degrees, there's St. Bees on this great circle and Douglas on the great circle. There's only a separation of 0.6 degrees between these points. That's what it is to scale. That's what it looks like on the Earth. This is not north to south. It's on a great circle. It's slightly twisted round to maximize the separation between the two. Now, one thing you may have noticed, I put all these ups and downs around here, and that's because one of the biggest problems I identified about a year and a half ago is that flat earthers don't understand what up and down is. They really don't. For instance, people like Nathan Oakley start talking about, well, you're leaning back on your heels or something if you're going to look at something, or this leaning back idea. And I think at least 50% of them do not understand what up and down. As you can see, up and down is a local experience for you. And here we've got Paul Voigt in Australia, down here, and his idea of up is quite a bit different to ours. And I don't think, I mean, even if you don't believe in a spherical Earth model, it's not an argument that you should be using. I mean, it's just incredible. And obviously, you can determine your own up and compare it with other people. If you can, if someone up here wanted to determine what their up and what your up is in relative to that, they could look at it, identify some stars that they could share, and then you could work out what your relative angle was. But the point is, up and down is a local effect. So much so that actually you can detect the change in up and down. Now, there are modern theodolites that if you move about sort of 600 meters, they will give you a different up and down horizontal value. So you can actually, with a theodolite, accurate theodolite, you can immediately detect the Earth as a sphere just by moving it around and checking for changes in your up and downness. Right. Yes, so the question is, do flat earthers think, even if they don't accept the Earth is flat, they should see this model, they should recognize that Paul down there is not leaning back. His idea of down is just towards the center of the Earth. Even if you don't accept that the Earth is centered on a spherical, you've got to accept the spherical geometry, and if you throw in gravity, that he is not doing any leaning at all, and neither is anybody else. So the people in St. Bees are not leaning because they're up is the same, it's different to the people in Douglas, but locally they're doing the same thing. Oh yes, and so this is a little aside here. So I was wondering, we often hear about this leaning, and so I thought, well, imagine if you were looking at the Eiffel Tower, how much would you detect away? Now, if you imagine that Eiffel Tower was on the Douglas and you at St. Bees, there'd be a 0.6 degree difference between your angle. That's what that 0.6 here is. So the question is, would you be able to detect even something as large as the Eiffel Tower, so well defined, leaning back? Now, did have prepared a 3D model of leaning back by just 0.6 degrees and seeing, I was going to put a test in here to see if anybody could spot the difference. You can't, of course, because remember, it's not leaning left to right, it's leaning away from you by 0.6 degrees. You can't even recognize. I mean, if these two lines here are separated by 0.6, if you saw them separately, you would not be able to tell the difference between them. Similarly, it's even worse because you're looking at them side on there. The Eiffel Tower leaning backwards or forwards, you wouldn't be able to tell. So you can't detect. All this leaning stuff is the thinkings of a child. Anyway, I was going a little test there, but I couldn't finish that. Right, this is to scale. This is a scale model of the St. Bees Douglas part of the Earth. So I've scaled up now. All I've done is to scale up what we had there, and I've just zoomed in, and we now have a full scale model here of what's going on. And you can see here, I was going to fill all this in with the various light curves and things, but unfortunately I haven't had time. And here's the cliffs that Anthony was on. And if imagine this, so let's go and zoom in here. And you should be able to see there, and I can't zoom in anymore at the full red, but there you should just see at the top. There is actually a little tripod that Anthony was using, and that is what what it's going to turn out to be, about 35 meters of cliff face is going to be look like. But that is what it looks like to scale, Anthony's viewpoint. And there, all this is what is going. Now you could see now this little. Now you may not. Now this is also a good issue to demonstrate curvature. That line there you might think is straight, but oh no, that reflects the curvature of the Earth. And you can see here, because I've drawn a straight line between the 2 points of Douglas. I've drawn a straight line between this point and that point, and then the Earth's curve. And you can see this is what's called the bulge. Quite often you'll see it in the metabunk things. That's what the bulge amounts to. But you can see relatively that the line of the curve of the Earth is incredibly slight, and that's why it's difficult to see. Right. Right, so that and here we have at the other end. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to draw in the Douglas, and I was gonna, I was gonna fill in so much in here, but unfortunately, I haven't had time. Things crashing on me, what have you. Right, so let's have a look at this composite. Now, this is a composite everybody not everybody seen, but many people have seen. And let's have a quick investigation of it. This is piecing together all the elements as Anthony's panned left and right. We've put people, but this is actually done by Ranty incompetently for 2 or 3 times. And actually, in the last one he did, he had the right-hand side going up an angle of 10 degrees. Somehow thought this was an optical effect, as though the sea actually rose up 10 degrees. Anyway, I fixed a number of things in that to eliminate such things. And so going back to the things that we mentioned earlier, these are the sorts of claims that about the video composite that is being made. So, for instance, on the far right here, we have this shellac point, which we've seen before moving around. And on the left-hand side, so this is a composite. So this is all the frames of Anthony's video put together, and I can zoom in. And so that's the thing that he initially thought was the end of the Isle of Man, and that's where he's now admitting that that is. So that's one point. Oh yes, and so over here we have. So now we're going to have to debunk that this is not part of Ireland. It's not part of Scotland, etc., etc. That is the new sort of revised claim. And we're going to have to show that the features in here are the right heights for the spherical Earth, because you'll often hear them say, "Oh, look, there's a wall of water so high, a mile high or something in between you and the island." Right. So I've mentioned the and to the right. So it should be there. Yes, and the other key thing is Douglas. Now they believe this is Douglas here, and that this will be featuring a lot in the subsequent discussion. But oddly enough, Ranty in his latest videos identified it as Baldrine, I think it is. Well, we're going. So it's actually they're changing. That little bunch of things there. It's got quite a story attached, as well as these 4 houses over here, or 4 blobs, sorry. So this tuft of trees here. They believe, because they believe this is, well, sometimes they believe it's Douglas, sometimes they believe it's Baldrine. They believe that this is a set of trees or something over a thing, and they believe this is Douglas Head, and these are 4 things. There are 4 houses on Douglas Head near Douglas, and the land. Oh, right. And so it's now, and so of course, if you accept this is Douglas Head, and if you remember the perspective we had up here. So if you believe, so these are the lines of sight, if you believe that this is Douglas here, then obviously anything to the left, you're getting down to this, you'll be able to see this Langness Lighthouse, and indeed they claim that's what you can see. So they're claiming things to the left of Douglas. So they're claiming what they can see in the left of that picture, to the left of Douglas, is this stuff here ending up at the Langness Lighthouse. So they're claiming that all this stuff over here. So there they claim that's Douglas. This is Douglas Head. This is some houses above Douglas. So everything to the left here, and then there's the thing here they claim is the lighthouse on the Langness Lighthouse. And to the left of that, they claim, well, given that that's the leftmost part of the Isle of Man, this all must be Ireland as well. So they're already saying, well, so their claims are, this is already too low to be seen, even if it's part of the Isle of Man. And certainly this stuff, then given the fact that the Isle of Man ends there, therefore this must be Ireland. So, right, that's how we're doing. And of course, obviously, they're saying that lots of things are too visible. So, for instance, there is the Moorgold Lighthouse, and we'll be looking at that in detail in a minute. And that should not be visible, they're claiming, along with things being too high. Right, so we're going to have to tackle those as well. Right, yes, yeah, okay. Right, so, oh yes, right, here we go. Now this is how a flat-eyed aside here, and I'm going to sort of read this. This is Ranty in action, because they, as I mentioned earlier, they couldn't work out how to get Google to manufacture a panorama. So basically, they wanted Google to manufacture a panorama that looked like this. They wanted Google to generate an image like this that they could then, because the only thing they understand is Google Earth. It's the only resource they seem to have, and they obviously wanted Google Earth to generate something that looked like this so they could then do some matching. they're apparently incapable of using maps or thinking apart. So they're trying to get Google to do this. So of course, Ranty did that, and he did it because he had no other means of doing anything. It was the only thing he could do inside Google Earth as far as he was concerned. He then made this claim, and here it is. Here, I mean, I've written it down, but he made it absolutely clear that using the zoom feature of a camera is equivalent to moving the camera closer to the target. And therefore, moving the camera in Google Earth closer accurately emulates the magnifying zoom operation of a physical camera. Basically, doesn't understand perspective. And then he went on in the video, which I haven't shown you, where he claims there's a sweet spot that if you go so close but not quite close enough, you avoid things getting too confusing. And he's apparently identified a spot that he thinks is great. And he then went on to then try and make some matches. And now, armed with this information, imagine if anybody came to you and said this to you, that zooming in a camera is equivalent to moving it in terms of the perspective change, you'd treat them scornfully and tell them to go away. But no, this was embraced by the Flat Earth thing. Yes, great, another piece of marvelous positive evidence for Flat Earth. Well done, Ranty. Have a sweetie or something. We'll put that in our library of facts, supporting facts. So Ranty may have made the suggestion, but they all embraced it. All of them. No one, as far as I'm aware, criticised him for this. And of course, that means that he then went on to misidentify things, which we'll be looking at in a minute. And of course, this information was then used by this 3D, the surveying guy with a 3D program Blender, and he used this information that Ranty created. So of course, all his this guy didn't bother to try and do the matches of the things, the bearings, which we're going to do in a second. He just simply went ahead and used Ranty's information, his composition of what his identification of what was where, put it into his model, and then guess what? It didn't work. And his reasoning was, well, if it doesn't work in my model, therefore it must be a flat Earth. Sort of an argument from ignorance. I mean, you couldn't really make yourself up. And as I say, I think these problems must have, to make a claim about the camera moving. You're starting to get to the stage where you wonder if they can dress themselves properly. Right, so obviously I'm going to have to explain this because they do base a lot of their diagrams, and they've even cited this as a marvelous piece of evidence, the image they generate. I'll show you the image in question actually just down here, this image here. So this is what they claim is a marvelous piece of evidence, and Ranty's sort of quite proud of it, and Nathan refers to it with reverence. Right, so, but if you just explore it for more than a nanosecond, you'll see what happens. So here we've got the view from St. Bees. And I've just put on an arbitrary field of view of the camera here, 15 degrees. Google Earth has a default view of 60 degrees. So, and I, through some quite considerable research, worked out where Ranty had put his camera to try and achieve this effect. And it's here. And as you can see, if you put the camera here and compare it to, so if the image was taken from here, observer 1, observer 2 is where Ranty is with his 60-degree field. You can see that, for instance, if I take two arbitrary points here, point 1 for the observer 2 for Ranty's position in Google Earth, point 1 is to the left of point 2. If you just draw a straight line from here, and in fact, I think I've got somewhere. Let me just click on here. I've even got a thing to. Oh, here we go. Yes. So. It's not quite as useful as I thought it was going to be. But anyway, you can see that point 1 would be to the left of point 2 for the observer here. But for the observer 1, point 1 is to the right of point 2. Now that should be immediately telling you that something's going to go horribly wrong if you're going to start identifying things. Because remember, the image was taken using observer 1, and my autosave is kicked in, which means I can't do anything. Fortunately, I'll go challenge. So you can see that immediately there's going to be a problem if you're going to be using things that are actually flipping over in between the image that's being taken and your perspective, and the objects are flipping over and between those two positions. You've got something that's completely worthless. And come on, stop auto-saving a damn thing. Oh, devil. Stop that. Come on, get it done. Get it done. Right. Right. So I then went on to actually. Now I've just given a theoretical analysis why that won't work, but these people do not seem to believe in theory, maths, or anything. So I actually went away and took some photographs of what the consequences would be in the real world, just in the hope this might make an impression on them. So what I did here is to take some photographs over one another, zooming in, and I've actually overlaid them. And this is zooming in. You can see what happens. Let me just hopefully. Come on, you. Why is that not doing anything? Am I clicking on the wrong? Oh, that's because I'm clicking on the wrong thing. That's why. And it's this group here. Oh, okay, right. Apparently, I thought I might be boring people, but apparently I've been asked to slow down a little bit. Yeah. So anybody who wants to make any comments, you're going to have to do it via Alex, and he'll relate anything to me if you think I'm being boring. Well, whether I do anything, I might not have any option. Right. So here. Right. So this is the original image. This is the initial shot. So then I zoomed in, and that actually is the zoomed in shot actually overlaid on top of the other one. And this is the zoomed in shot overlaid. Obviously, I wiggled the camera slightly, and this is overlaid again. Another further zoomed in shot. Finally zoomed in more, and then zoomed in even more. And I focused the object of my attention is the tree here. And as you can see, all these overlaid pictures, I mean, they're slightly different color because, of course, when you zoom in, you get different lighting conditions. But you can see they're all perfectly aligned, all the same scale. Everything, all the objects are the same respect to one another. So, for instance, here, this bike is not changing its relative position to the goalposts, or the tree, all this gym equipment, all the trees. So zooming in is doing exactly what I'm doing here with my zoom in tool. So that's fine. So that's what zooming in does. Great. So what happens then if you start moving towards the object in question? Now, we all know obviously most of the people listening here are going to know what's going to happen, but apparently not. Apparently, I mean, this is the levels you have to go to explain them. So, and what so what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the tree in the distance the same size. So I'm going to scale everything. You sometimes see this in videos and pop videos where they change the zoom and move the camera at the same time to keep the objects at the same time. They change, the perspective of them changes. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to move towards this bush, and I'm then subsequently in this program, I've then rescaled it to try and keep the bush the same size. So I've moved in, so you should see. So if I now use the transparency facility of this thing, I should now be able to. You can see here, these are the two images here. You can see that the tree in the distance is remaining in the same place. But wowee, as you'd expect, I've moved towards the bicycle. It's suddenly become much, much bigger. And you can also see these trees are actually swapped. I mean, there you can actually see that over here, the trees are actually swapping around. They've changed, they've actually swapped position. And as you go in further, okay, well, I haven't reselected, that's why. And so similarly, this is me, again, going a little bit further. And you can see, again, we're getting more changes. We're getting, of course, we've suddenly lost the goalposts that we've walked by, of course, which is another major feature. And again, the things of trying to flip round. Again, I'm just focusing on the, let's click on this. And so I'll zoom in as well, actually, to just get the idea. And again, you can see I'm keeping the tree the same size, and your trees over here are swapping around. And things in distance obviously don't move very much, but the things near to you are. So I think you get the idea there. And finally, you know, I mean, it's just, I mean, the fact that I'm having to explain this to an adult is just incredible. And you can see things like the trees are just swapping places like crazy. Things in the distance aren't moving very much. Anyway, so you get the idea. So if you start having that philosophy, you don't understand perspective, and you start doing that sort of thing, then you end up with an embarrassing document like this. Whoops. this is the thing that this is the thing they use as their basis for handing over to their 3D modeling guy, their identifications. And so what I've done here, the original document, all I've done is to add the blue and the red arrows. Oh, and this thing here. And this is horribly distorted. So this is the this is the image in Google Earth that he's acquired by moving within 8 miles or so of it, which means obviously that things that are very near to that point are going to be moved a lot, but things that are far away, like Snaffel, are not going to move very much. He's also twisted the angle. He's also rotated, as you saw from my position. He's rotated around, and you can see this on the left-hand side. These are the lines of sight from St. Bees to this position. You can see we're almost at 40 degrees to that, as you can see here. This angle here against that is about 40 degrees. So we're looking along. And one important point to note is, from this position, when you look along that side, you're actually looking along the coast. And that's going to be quite important in a second to understand what effect that causes. So I have actually had to go through this, working out what it is he's identified and what he's got wrong. Now, he's actually got the 2 correct matches. And that's because he's on the very low pieces of ground here. He's managed to get a match there and a match there, and he's Ballarat, and he's actually got that correct. Amazing. And he's also got the Moorgold Lighthouse correct, but that's very difficult to get wrong. And I can't remember he's got that correct as well. But you can see that, in fact, my blue lines on here represent the joins, and you can see they're actually crossing over. And particularly what you'll find is that if things get higher, they're going to be moving less than things low. In other words, all the things that are low level are going to shift to the left. And that means that things are going to cross over. And then he's identified this as Ballachanal here, which Anthony Riley and previously they'd identified as Douglas, which is, I think, quite hilarious. And there's several videos of them identifying this as Douglas, because they even call this Douglas Head, etc., etc. But no, now they've occasionally they call it Ballachanal, not Ballachanal, they call it Baldrine. But it's actually Ballachanal. And you'll see that also that when you go further to the left, the difference accelerates, and that's because they're looking along the line ahead, because they are effectively looking down. All the bearings here they've got down here all the same. In other words, all the points on the coast are going to have the same bearing from this perspective, just about, which means that there's nothing that's going to go left. Whereas from the perspective of observer 1, they can move left. Bits of a man can go left, but this observer 2, everything's almost on the same bearing, so you're not going to get very much movement towards the left of the picture. So therefore, you get distortion. Whereas we, in the image, so this is the image taken from server 1 here, you're going to get things going extensively to the left, but in Google Earth from the position, it doesn't. And so what he's tried to do is to match this leftmost position in Google Earth to this, and then said, oh, look, there's all this extra bit. Well, that's caused by the angle you've chosen. You're looking down the side of the coast in your Google Earth position, and the image isn't. So if I hear it, I've got it here. Right. So you can see here we have observer 2 looking down along the coast, which means that there's nothing is going to move to the left really very much along here. But for the observer 1, where the picture was taken from, which he's trying to match it to, there is quite a lot of movement to the left. And yes, and I've mentioned here, there's an amusing video of where even Ranty gets confused about whether he's looking at Ballachanal or Baldrine or whatever. Anyway, that's most embarrassing. So that was a little aside. And so what it could be doing, of course, is that because they were trying to use Google Earth as their means of generating a panorama, they didn't bother to go and find out, how to do it in Google Earth, which is quite difficult, actually, or find any other resources to generate panoramas, or use maps, because there's a thing called Peak Finder, which people should go and look at if they want to generate panorama. There's another German program, which I've got a link to here, which can generate a nice panorama. And Google Earth, if you are clever enough, you can get that to generate a nice panorama at high resolution. And yes, and also, what's that? And of course, yes, the various problems in these things. I mean, the panorama generated things don't generate very much detail, and Google Earth has a terrible problem, the fact that it's only accurate to plus or minus 30 meters, which is what in the elevation, which we're going to be talking about in a second. So here's a map. It's not obviously you can't generate a panorama from this, but at least from your bearing you can see what should be high and low, and obviously it gives all the detail. So that's a useful online resource. Now this is something called Peak Finder, which does generate a panorama, and it enables you to, and it even provides you with identifications of things. You can go to an arbitrary point on the planet and give it your view angle, your height, and it generates a lovely panorama for you. And it even provides identification. Not only does it doesn't obviously do the man-made stuff. It's all about peaks. So you will, but that's obviously very useful, as we'll find later. And this other tool called this German thing, and thanks to Dr. Johners for giving me a link to this, which also provides, oh yes, one of the interesting things is it provides you with bearings at the top. You can't quite see them in Peak Finder very easily, but there they are, there and there. So it's telling you what the bearing of this particular point is relative to the observer point, and a little scale across the top, and the one in things makes it a bit clearer, gives a bit of higher resolution. Again, identifies peaks. So this is also another independent generating panorama tool, which you can also use to help you out. And here we have a panorama in Google Earth that's been created. Well, a rather arduous process, but you can do it. And you can see here, this is actually a low resolution version. I've got a much higher resolution version hidden away. And we now have 3 panorama generating tools, and we have the image. Now, the point is, do these models and the video composite match? That's what we want to do, because obviously the tools are not going to be no good if they don't match the image. And so a good test is going to be if those 3 panorama generating tools match one another and match the composite. And then if that all happens together, those 4 things come together, we're on the money. Things are going to get exciting. We can start pulling things apart. And so here's the composite from the video that's being composed, and we can overlay those things. Here we go. So let's that's the image there, and we can overlay the Peak Finder thing. And there we go. And then we can play around with the transparency of the Peak Finder image, just to emphasize it and to see how good it is. So let's zoom in a little bit and see how close this is. And you should be able to see there that the match against the picture, the image, the video composite, is remarkable. So the fix is that, so Ranty actually did manage to compose it a bit. No, it's not really a difficult task, but he managed to make a meal of it. My fix is over on the right-hand side of things, and let's just compare here. So you can see as I bring it in, even the islands on the right-hand side here are matching just as well as you could possibly want. So Peak Finder's doing a great job there. That's matching the picture. Okay, so perhaps that's an accident. Let's go and see what else. Let's go and see the German panorama generating program, see what it's got to say for itself. Oh, and let's click on that and see what that's got to say. Looks quite good so far. Whoops, I've clicked on the wrong damn thing, haven't I? So we've got the picture on the bottom, and we'll change the transparency of the thing on top. And you should be able to see there, again, the match is just amazing. Let's go and look at those islands over here. And you can see there's our little shallak point just there. You can see again, the match is just extraordinarily good. Extraordinarily good. Not just quite good, extraordinarily good. So what about Google Earth then? That's because everybody likes to play with Google Earth, don't they? Well, why have I done that? Okay. Let's switch off this peak layer. I've clicked on some wrong things here. Right. So this comp thing I generated, Google Earth composite. Where's my Google Earth composite gone? That's not, it's the low res composite I wanted, that's why. Whew, have me wait for a moment. Right, so there is the Google Earth composite I've created, the Panorama. And again, let's go zoom in a bit. And this, of course, is much higher detail than the panoramas generated by the Peak Finder and the because this obviously got lots of detail that doesn't exist. And again, the match is just extraordinary. you could not. And again, over the right-hand side, which is a nice key feature. There we go. So we have got 4 things that agree with one another, and we can go confidently ahead saying we have the tools now to do some analysis of identifying things. And so we know where everything is, we know the angles of everything. Now, once you've done this, of course, means that you can then determine what the bearings of objects. So for instance, we can say this particular mountain is here, this one over there is there, and you can then where's my oops, it's just right. So you can then say you can then, I won't justify this, but there's mathematically you can, that the degrees, there's a match between the pixels. There's a slight inaccuracy, but we'll ignore that for this. It's close enough, more than close enough to be able to use this usefully. You can match the pixels in the image against the degree. So if you know from the peak finder, for instance, information where this peak is and where this peak is, you know the angle between them. Either you can even do it with an ordnance survey map if you like, or use the angles in peak finder or whatever, or Google Earth as well, the panorama there. So once you've know the bearing difference between those two, well, okay, great. Then you can, what have I done with the rest of that? You can then say, once you've established one, you know that twice the number of pixels is going to give you twice the bearing. And once you've done that, you can then say, right, okay, you can then generate this thing down below I've got here, which I've been given to various people. You can then say, these are the bearings. So you can now say that every point on here has a particular bearing for a particular point. And Geo was very hot on this as well. In fact, Geo actually did this just half a day before I did. Alex was on the case on this. And also, as well as horizontally, you can also generate a vertical bearing. So if I set up 0 degrees on the horizon, you can say that this is in 0.1 of a degree. There's 1 degree there. You can say this tuft of trees here is at 0.1 of a degree above the horizon. So that will be very useful to us later. And so it now means that we know the bearing, for instance, of this point on the land. So we can say that the bearing of the leftmost thing we can see is this. We can go down to our scale here, find that it's 237.2 something. 0.32, I've got it there, I think, yeah. And then obviously on the right-hand side, we can do the same thing. And there is our right-hand side image, and we can say that's at 258.2. So we now know the angular size of the thing that Anthony was looking at, which is great because now, why is that down? Well, that's because I switched it on. Whoops, these are my high res. Right, and so, but also you can also do some additional checks. You can say, well, this might all be fine and dandy, you might think, but there's the hyper skeptics in the Google Earth community, in the flat Earth community, they don't accept anything. You know, that was done. You know, they just don't accept anything, do they? So what you can then do is say, well, okay, from this, I can now say that I expect to see the Moor Gold Lighthouse, which is there. I can take a bearing on this and say that's where I expect the Moor Gold Lighthouse to be. And then you can go and say, you could go and check in Google Earth on an ordnance survey map and see if it's there, and you find it is. And you go and take somewhere else. You can say, well, where's this shallow point here? Go and take my bearing on here, and you find, and then you go and look at the ordnance survey map or Google Earth or whatever, and you find that's where it is. Yay! So you know you've got all sorts of ways of verifying that this bearings are absolutely valid. And you can also do things. Obviously, you can say, well, let's suppose I know there's something in here on the. You can do it 2 ways. You can either say, I know there are things on the Isle of Man, and then see what the bearing is, and then seeing if it appears on here. So, for instance, you could do the reverse. You could say, if you happen to know the bearing of the Moor Gold Lighthouse, you could then say, well, where does it appear? Or something like this. I can't remember what that's called. It's at Glenmoa, I think. And then you could say, well, does that appear there? And it does. And so you know that this is all working perfectly. And it all agrees with Peak Finder and the German Panorama thing. and so you can check both ways about what's in the image going to on the Google Earth and Google Earth going to the image. Everything works. Everything works. So this is absolutely rock solid, guaranteed. You can bank your mortgage on this, of giving you the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the of what you can see. So what does that mean? Well, that means that from the St. B's point of view, we've now determined there's a 20.96 field of view, and we know the rightmost point here is just goes left of underneath Cranston, and that the leftmost point is Clay Head, and we cannot see anything to the left of this point here, which means that any claims about golf courses, lighthouses, or stuff up here or stuff up in Scotland or something can be just binned immediately. We can bin about half the claims with this discovery here straight away. All those can be just thrown away. You can dismiss them immediately. And I think as it curved, he used this policy. He doesn't bother to think about anything. Just simply says, is it off the bearing? Therefore, you're talking bollocks. And that's really the way to do it. But we can challenge it a bit more. And this is what it looks like on an Ordnance Survey map, the field of view. Again, there's Cranston up there, and there's Clay Head here. So the only things we can see are in that area of that's described in pink. Everything outside that we can't see. And obviously things that are obscuring one another because of heights, we can't see either. But certainly anything outside that pink area is not in the photograph, is not in the video composite. As a quick, yes, it's just referring to this imbecile with the, yes, of course, because the guy with the 3D model you thought could have worked this out as well. You know, he had a LiDAR map of the Isle of Man, which is very accurate. And you'd have thought he would be, I mean, obviously, God knows what he does. I mean, he's using Blender, which is free. But he does seem to be somewhat involved in some sort of surveying thing. And you'd have thought he had absolutely no care and rigor about what he did. He just simply took the appalling picture that I showed you above of Ranty's, tried to match it against the model. He didn't bother to do any bearing checks himself, and he just basically said, if it doesn't work, therefore this model is wrong, completely ignoring the possibility of him being an idiot or doing something wrong. That sort of ludicrous confidence is obviously typical of flat earth. They don't check what they do. They're not meticulous. And he doesn't seem to have any understanding of geometry either, because he didn't understand this drop and hidden thing. You got the impression he's a very slow-minded sort of surveying character. I mean, he's almost as incompetent as Ranty. And he then suggested, he's like, which included horizon. Oh, that's right. Yes, one part of his model, he had the image rotating, and the horizon changed. So in other words, looking to the right or to the left, in his model, he tried to emulate a spherical Earth model. The horizon was moving up and down. I mean, it's just laughable what he was presenting. So his name was Chris Monk. Right, now, okay, so now we've got an image. We need to do those heights that we were looking at, those positions of objects above the horizon. The claims that we were having to deal with, remember, one of the claims that the fighter was making was seeing too much of things. So what we need to do is we need to understand from the spherical geometry what we should be expecting to see. Now, you may be familiar with the metabunk thing, which effectively implements what I'm about to show you. But I'm going to, because this is being challenged recently, I didn't want to do this initially, but because it's been challenged, I'm going to have to show you how that thing works. Though this is actually a slightly more sophisticated version of the metabunk calculator, slightly more accurate. Though over a couple hundred miles, it's almost no different, the results. But this will work over up to 180 degrees, 6,000 miles or something. Get the answer right. So we need to understand what we're going to call this hidden thing, and that has recently been dismissed by some of the flat earthers as not being relevant. And what we need to work out what we expect to see in an image, because remember, this whole issue is about an image that's been taken, and we need to know what the spherical geometry is saying we should see. What should we see in that image? Because the whole point of the claims being made here is that there's a discrepancy between the image and the spherical geometry. So we need to first of all work out what the spherical geometry is saying about the positions of things vertically. We've already identified some of the horizontal issues already, but we now need to sort out some of the positions vertically. What is behind the curve? What's above the curve? How much is it going to be above the curve? What's the relationship between the height of something measured on the Isle of Man to the horizon? Right, so we need a little bit of geometry. It's very simple. So even a flat earther, I mean, if you're about 13, I think 12 or 13 is probably all you need to be able to understand this. So obviously 50% of the flat earthers are going to have a problem. Right. So because, I mean, for instance, when questioned Anthony Riley about whether he could, given the situation we've got here, this triangle, I said, and various other ones, you know, if I gave you this angle here and one of the distances, could you work out the other what the other sides were? And they clearly they couldn't. And not only could they not do it, they didn't even know how to go about it. Which of course, I mean, people forget about whether with what cos and sine, which way around is. But anybody who's done some basic been to school with moderate intelligence, you know, it wouldn't take more than a few minutes to get back up to speed. But these people didn't have an even idea about what's going on. And of course, this was invented by Hipparchus, and the Greek guy was invented earlier. But the basic idea, of course, is in trigonometry is that whatever you do with this triangle, if it's got a particular angle, the ratios of the sides are going to remain the same. And so, of course, so if you know this one side, if you know 2 bits of information about a right-angled triangle, this is a right-angled triangle, of course. Trigonometry will deal with any 3-sided object. If you get 2 pieces of information about a right-angled triangle, you can determine everything else. And so, of course, Hipparchus, not knowing the ratios of these things, he had to go and said he was the first person to actually create tables for this. So the only so all the trigonometry is the ratio of these sides, and the only one you actually need to know, in fact, in this demo, is that the adjacent. So here's the angle opposite the right angle. The adjacent to that angle over the hypotenuse is equal to cos. And then you can just simply move the h to here and put the cos into there, and that you can look at the hypotenuse if you've got the adjacent. So the only thing you need to know is if you've got the hypotenuse. So if you've got any one of those, 2 of those 3 things, you can work out the other one. And what we'll need to know here, so if you want to work out, for instance, the hypotenuse and you've got the adjacent, the 1 over cos here is actually a sec. So in fact, the hypotenuse is equal to a sec theta. But it's just a sec. You might not have meant that very much, but it just means 1 over cos theta. And if you want to know what the angle is and you've got the sides, well, if given that cos theta is the adjacent, as it says here, the cos theta is adjacent over the hypotenuse, that gives you cos theta. If you want to find out what theta is and you've got a and h, you do the inverse cos function to get the theta. So that's really all. In fact, we're not even going to use Pythagoras. On the circular geometry side, all you need to know is that the angle theta here is simply equal to the distance along the arc divided by the radius. Now, that's in radians. And the inverse of that, so in other words, you can determine theta if you've got s and r, and you can determine s if you've got r and theta. Just by flipping, moving the r up to here, you get what s is. And if you want to, this is how it works in radians. If you want to use degrees, you end up with extra factors of 2 pi and 360. So real men use radians, and that's why. Right, so now that's the trigonometry you need to understand. So this is what you have to do. Hopefully this is going to be quick. Right, come on. Okay, so let me just get my little scripty thing here. Right, so this is what we have an observer on the Earth here, or just we can think of it as an ant or whatever on a spherical object, and we need to know just 3 things about this whole situation to be able to make all the things work. First of all, the tangent to the point of this is the observer here of A0 at height 0, and the tangent to that point is obviously at a right angle to that, and we have a distance s to the object we're interested in, the target object, and this is what's called the drop. Now, people like Nathan Oakley seem to use the word drop, and they don't understand there's a specific meaning to the word drop. But actually, even I am not using necessarily the correct term, because many surveyors will argue that this is the drop here. Because when they're worrying about poles and things, and the poles they align to be vertically, and but I'm going to moment, this is the drop that you might have heard of, that's equal to the x squared, 8 inches times x squared in miles distance. And that's that value there. It's a geometric thing. It's nothing. It's how much is below this this point here. So if you're looking, obviously, if you were looking up, this will change dramatically. This is entirely dependent on what angle this eye is looking at. And you're bloody auto-saving again, aren't you? You damn thing. I'm gonna have to really stop that. Sod it, I can't stop that. That's going to take us a few seconds. So obviously, up is local again here for each observer, and so we got in the spherical geometry. We've got so sorry. This line represents three things. This is a tangent to the point of the observer. It's also the line of sight for the observer because they can't look anywhere else if they're on the zero. They can't actually look up. That's their line of sight, and it's also the horizontal for the observer. Right. Let me just switch off this stupid autosave before that happens again. Backups. There we go. Let's just switch this off. So that won't happen again. Right. Right. So So when we want to know how much we can see, right? So so this is an initial point. The drop is irrelevant to what we're doing, because what we're doing is we're trying to compare what we can see. Someone like a surveyor might be interested in this number, but we're only interested in what affects on the vision. This has no bearing. You can't see this join between your line of sight and the perpendicular and thing. It doesn't feature in any of the. It's not a photographic issue. What we're interested in is. Let me just get my little script up here. What we're interested. So we've got distance, destination, Earth rate. Here we go. Need to get some Earth radials going. So to start doing any sort of maths on this, we need to God, this is complicated. There we go. Earth radials. Right. I really could do with them when that's stuck up. Just. Oops. Oh God, that's probably screwed you, hasn't it? No, I better not do that. Okay, I need to sod it. I'm gonna have to. Yeah, okay, right. Right. So with those Earth radials, and we're going to move the observer height. We're going to think of an observer above the above the sorry, this is going to make my life a bit difficult. A1 observer on. Fuck. Yeah, this is a bit unfortunate. I didn't have time to practice. There's A1 line of sight. I think this A1, where the hell is A1 line of sight? Oh, there we go. Right. God damn it. Right. So now we're considering, let's get rid of those A0 crap. No, that's not what I wanted. Obscured for A0 line of sight. There we go. Just to reduce the confusion. Right. So now we consider an observer at a particular height A1. And this, and you can see clearly immediately, this portion of the building is obscured by this line of sight here, by the horizon, by the curve of the Earth. So this is what's important, not drop. It's irrelevant what the drop's doing. what you're interested is a visual thing about whether or not you can see something in relation to the horizon, because all the pictures and things you do are related to the horizon and how it interferes with what you can see. When we talk about something below the curve, we mean it's being obscured by the horizon. So the question is now, how much, we want to know now how big this is. We're going to be using this formula. We're going to generate a formula to know how big h is for a particular height here and a particular distance. And right, so I think oh bugger, I've missed off calculating drop, but never mind. I think I have to sort that. Oh yes, one other thing, ups and downs. Remember those where those ups and downs are. There. We've got the destination text, yes. We've got, so this is obscured, yes. Destination Earth radials, yes. Earth circle, yes. Layer 1, yes. Right, great. Right, so the question is now, what can we do to generate a formula? And we can work out this sector here, this angle, as I showed you before. Given this distance here, we can then work out what theta is, because that little bit of geometry we did up here. If you know S and R, we've got this little formula here, we can work out what theta is. And great, okay, that's useful. And then, but the trouble is, we've now got a triangle. We're trying to work out what this H is. We don't know that. We do know R, we do know A, but we don't know this length of this triangle here, and we don't know this distance here, which means, in effect, we don't know this side, and we don't know this side. Now, for right-angled triangles, you can just need 2 pieces of information, but for something without a right angle in it, you need 3. And unfortunately, the only thing we've got is we've got just theta and one side. That's only 2 things. So it doesn't matter whether you use the sine rule or the cos rule, you're not going to get very far with that. But fortunately, this horizon point gives us some extra information. A1 horizon radius, got it. Right, so now because we know this is touching as a tangent, we know that these are right angles, and which means we've now suddenly got some right angled triangles to play with. So now you can say, aha, well, because I know this side is R, the thing we're trying to find out is R plus H. This is the thing we've now, I mean, if we knew what this angle here was, we've got 2 angles here, triangle A and B in center. You could say, well, if we could work out what B is, we know what R is, then we've got a right angle triangle. So that's 2 bits of information. Because we do not know this thing along here, we're never going to work that out, and we can't work, and this is what we're trying to work out. So the only thing we're left with working out, we can deal with is this side here and this angle. So the question is, if we could work out this angle is, we could then work out what this angle is, and given the fact that we know that R plus H is equal to minus R, H is equal to R plus H minus R. So if this side here minus R is going to give us H, great. But unfortunately, that means we now need to know what B is. But we can see that it's A plus B is equal to theta. So if we go work out what A is, actually, no, this is where I'm going to need to go. Ding, 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 ding. Right, triangle 4 on, that's what I wanted. Yes, so that triangle there is what I'm talking about. Let's get those ups and downs off. Right, so that's the triangle which we're trying to deal with here. And right, so if we could then work out what, God, if I wish I could, so triangle names on, right? Okay, and this gives our 2 triangles. Triangle 1 off. And there's the other triangle. So let's get rid of triangle 1. No, I want to get rid of triangle 4. And now I want triangle 1. Right. So if we could work out A, which we need to do to work out B, but we can work out A because we know, because of the altitude of the observer here and the radius, we know what this side is. And also, we know what this side is because it's the radius. We've suddenly got 2 bits of information, which means we can work out A. So we can work out A which means that we can work out B. Right, and I was trying to, oh God, this is impossible without me being able to see the script. Triangle 4 sides on. No, that's not what I wanted. RB cos on. Right, so this, for this triangle here, we've got opposite hypotenuse. And we know this is R plus H, and so triangle 4 off. Damn it. Oh, this is very difficult without me being able to see the triangle 1 on. Oh, God. I seem to have lost my... There should be triangle 4 sides, and where's that gone? Fuck it. I think I'm just going to go to the conclusion. I haven't remembered this well enough to. What you end up with is this. Anybody's interested, they can go through this. Is that you end up with this? You end up with this formula down here, basically, which is R sec S over R minus arc cos R slash R plus over R plus A minus 1. There's a summary of the maths up here. Where's the summary gone? Up here. And so that is the hidden variable. That's the value of hidden, is that. And also this dip, which is also quite important here, is equal to this. And also that means that if you know what the dip is for something, and you know your height, which is altitude, you can actually work out the radius, which as 11th century Persian did. But anyway, that's the value for the hidden, and that is the important thing. The drop is irrelevant because this drop, as I said, it's irrelevant. The fact you've got something. You're dealing with the oh fuck it. You're interested in what things look like with respect to the horizon, because that's always what you're doing for visual things. So this value of H is the thing that you need to know what effect it's having on what you can see. It's irrelevant whether you've got something going off if you're building a railway line or trying to build up something. You're looking at what the vision is. Anyway, sod that. Without a script, that was very difficult. And here you can see what this function here, R sec does with respect to observer height. And this is the importance about the observer height is very important. It has a big effect. So here you can see is a graph of the distance from the observer and what's hidden. And you can see that it's quite dramatic. For the observer at 0, if you consider something at 30,000 meters, there's a difference of 60 meters between one at 35 meters and at 0 meters. So it's absolutely vital, and you can understand it. You can sort of see that, you know, how much difference there is as you wiggle this up and down. It's going to have a huge effect, which I can actually demonstrate with another, if I go up even higher, with this A2. You can see here, there's another observer up here. Let me get rid of this bloody, God, there's just too many things to fucking. There's another observer here, and you can see the dramatic effect. This obscured here has changed dramatically just for a sort of doubling of this. You've have a dramatic effect, and we all know this. If you go and look, if you put your eye close to the ground, you can't see very much. You just need to go a few feet up, and you can see dramatically more. As you go higher and higher, it becomes less important. But certainly at the low altitudes, it's important. This is what this graph is demonstrating: is that for low altitudes, particularly, the difference is enormous. So basically, you've got to get the observer height right if you're going to get the maths right. Jesus Christ. And oh yes, once there's a bit of maths I was going to do. Once you if you do know also how much above the horizon something is. So for instance, we can see here the degrees, because we've previously worked out from this bearings thing earlier. You can also use it vertically, and so you can see, for instance, this point here, this little house here is 0.167 above the horizon. I put 0 on the horizon, and from that, and if you know the distance from the little formula we did before, this times radius, this little bit of geometry we did up here, a little bit of geometry there, we're using this again. If you know theta and you know the distance and you're sufficiently far away so there's a minimum error, which we are in this case, you can work out s, which is the height above something. So you can work out the length of the arc simply by knowing the angle above the horizon and the distance to the object in question. What you can normally do is you can identify this particular an object here. You can say, oh well, I'll find out what this object is on the map. I know its distance, and therefore I can work out what angle I would expect it to be above the horizon. I unfortunately was going to do a lot more on that, so that you can. This also helps in identifying things, because you can then identify how high they should be above the something. Right. So we've now got a formula. That formula there for what should be hidden, but unfortunately, that's not the whole story. Unfortunately, we have something. We've been drawing in straight lines here, haven't we? And unfortunately, nothing in the world is straight, at least not. And we've got this thing called refraction, which we'll be familiar with. When things go from a dense medium to a less dense medium, you get the refraction. So here's it's a case of a pencil. And as you can see, we should all be familiar with, as a transition occurs between one medium and another, one dense medium, because it's all about the velocity of the speed of light in the two mediums. The change in velocity causes it to change an angle, according to Huygens' wave generating principle. And there's a law associated with this, of course, because if there's numbers associated with it, Snell's law, which should be all familiar with if you're more than 13. And you get it relates the angle of incidence versus the angle of refraction. And that's related to the velocity. Newton actually got this around the wrong way. He tried to justify it by actually having the light going faster in denser mediums, but in fact it turns out to be the other way around. And the more dense a medium is, the slower light is. It's a very, very, very complicated reason for that, which involves quantum mechanics, very complicated quantum mechanics as well, the sort of stuff you wouldn't, even an undergraduate physicist would have problems with it. And it just basically relates to the density, the change in velocity of the light, which is related to the density of the medium. Right. Okay. So that's Snell's law. So we know how much it's going to angled. Now, this is sort of a side here. Sort of a side, because one of the phrases used by the moronic flat earthers is, "I see it, therefore it's there. Say what you see." I see it because it's there. There it is. I can see it. I see it. There is. What's all this complication? I can see something. I can see it. Therefore, it's there. Therefore, it's there. And I can say what you see. A classic sort of. And they all agree with that. Yes, we're overcomplicating it. Why are you making such a fuss about, things where you see them? Well, okay then. Let's have a look at this. This is a knife in a bowl, and we see it's there. We see the tip of the knife there. We see that's where it is. That's so I can see it. I see it. I see it. I see it. There it is. It must be there because I can see it there. Okay, then. Where's the goddamn? And I think I'll get the top one. Right. So what happens if we empty the water out? Oh dear. It wasn't there after all, was it? Oh dear. I bet I'm really glad. I'm real pity I said I see what's there. Oh dearie me. So that's just what happens with a refractive index change. And most people knew this, but apparently it's this is difficult for your average flat earther. It's because you see what's there. And of course you can have other things like here's quite a good one, little glass trick here. You can actually get it to reverse direction. Depending on what you've got it looking through. Yeah, so basic, and of course the never mind. Yeah, there's a lot of abuse basically there. I won't bother with of flat earthers. But here's a little fish actually that doesn't do seeing what you say and saying what you see, or doesn't even say anything or believe what's there. It actually feeds on insects above water, and to do so, it has to understand refraction. It doesn't go follow the philosophy of saying what you see and seeing what's there. It's actually remarkably good. It can hit, I think, 5 feet away, as I remember, which is, it doesn't just go underneath the object, underneath the target. It actually can go up to, I think, about 40 degrees, as far as I remember, and still hit the target accurately. And it's not just hit or miss. It's not that it just persists. It actually gets it right, close to right for the first time. And this leads on to another principle that flat earthers, they are happy to accept refraction occurs if it's extreme, if it's a mirage, if it's something dramatic happening. They'll say, oh, that's refraction. But immediately it's more subtle, presumably because they like to have confidence in their senses. They don't accept it, except in the case of something obvious like water. They just like to think their senses are telling the truth because it's there, I can see it. It's there. Their little simpleton minds, that's what they do. So anything that's subtle, because of course they just miss. Right. So let's consider the situation for a theoretical situation here of an object we've got here, and it's emitting light, and we've got it's on this sphere, and we've got a layer of glass around that sphere, and then the air around that. So imagine a light coming out of going through the sphere, and this is a uniform medium. It's homogeneous. There's no change between the top and the bottom of this glass. It's going to carry on, but it will actually go along a straight line while it's in the same medium, while it's the same density. But immediately it hits the change of medium, the Snell's law kicks in, and it gets bent. Okay. Now imagine you've got a slightly different sphere. Let's imagine you've got a sphere surrounded by 5 layers of glass. Each time it hits a layer, you're going to little bend, which means you're going to get this sort of effect. Sorry, I forgot to mention that the different refractive indexes for each one of these layers. So they're slightly less refractive for each layer. Densest at the bottom, least dense at the top. So the light will gradually speed up as it comes out here. And following Snell's law, yes, if you didn't see, I did actually have Snell's law acting in here. This light came in here. This is the angle of it. You work to the normal of the boundary. So there's the angle of incidence. There's the angle of refraction. And so you get that the Snell's law acting with this normal to the boundary. And so of course you've got lots of those little Snell's laws happening here. And imagine if you now made those layers of glass very, very thin. Imagine you made them sort of the width of a molecule. You get a very, very smooth, curvy thing of light coming out, all bending like that. So the glass is all homogeneous, but it's very, very thin. Now, this is actually exactly what the atmosphere is like, because although it might be the same, the atmosphere might be the same to the top and the bottom to a reasonable degree. It's under compression, just like water is in the pool, which means it's changing density as it goes down. If it's changing density, it's changing its refractive index. It's not very much, but nonetheless it's changing. And so effectively what you've got is a sort of infinitely thin layer of these things, and which means you're going to get this effect here, which is this loop, which is this curving around a sphere. So you can imagine this is equivalent to the Earth. Solids, of course, don't do this, but because we're in an atmosphere which is a gas, it's compressible. Although it's a homogeneous medium, because you can't see flat earth say, oh, but it's all air. Yeah, but it's air under different pressure. It's got different density. So air at the bottom, of course, air on the ground level is much more compressed and dense. And here's a little chart showing how that changes. We've got the right-hand side, bottom right-hand side, we've got 1, 1. This is the situation at the ground. And we've got various things here demonstrating what happens to the temperature, the density, and the pressure. And the one we're interested in is this red one. This is what happens to the density. And as you can see, it's most dense here. And so going to the left is less dense. And as you can see, follow the red line. This is in meters. So it's going up very, very high here, up to 10,000 meters. But as you can see, at 10,000 meters, it's 0.35. Even at about 2,000 meters, it's 0.9. And anybody who goes skiing, of course, will would be familiar. I mean, if you go skiing at 10,000 meters, yes, so 3,000. So if you might go skiing at about this sort of thing here, the density of the air is going to be what, 0.75 of the. Yeah, so they always talk about skiing when you're skiing on a very high thing that you might get 1/3 less oxygen, and indeed, because the density's gone down, you've effectively got 1/3 less oxygen. If the density goes down by 1/3, that means you've got the concentration of oxygen has gone down by 1/3 as well. So you can see there that as you go up, you lose density, you lose temperature as well. That all these decrease. The temperature decreases, the pressure decreases, and the density decreases. The temperature goes linearly decreasing, but the pressure has a sort of exponential. Oh God, there's all sorts of. I've tried to how standard atmospheres. Oh, this is a good picture from Ali K, which I was going to refer to, showing how. Do you see what you see? Say what you see. When you're close to the surface of the water. This is a picture he took, and you can see here you get these inversion layers because obviously the sunlight warms up water. It interacts very little with air, and so of course, but it does interact with water rather more, which means you get these very warm spots very near the surface of the water, which means they get extra hot, much hotter. And if they get extra hot, that means they're much less dense. So they don't follow this graph. So this graph is for a standard atmosphere. For up to 10,000 meters, they're not really worried about what happens in the bottom 4 feet. But unfortunately, we're looking through the bottom 4 feet, so you can get what's called inversion layers, which cause problems. But again, do you see what we see? See what you say? Is it there? I say it. See? Oh no! Oh, look! It's there because I can see it. No, it isn't. Right. So what does the effect have then on this refraction? What does it do to what we see? Well, here's the situation we were dealing with earlier. With our building, this is a lighthouse in this case, and we were drawing straight lines. As you can see there, we've got a straight line to this point here. But now, if this light starts curving in this way, when you comes to your eye just assumes it's coming in a straight line. So your eye, if this light here that I've got here, this comes in at your eye at the same angle as this, you're going to extend the line out and assume it came following a straight line, because that's what you tend to do. Obviously, we've learnt that, and you're going to think it's here. So what has happened here is this lighthouse appears to be much higher because of this curving, and that's called looming. It's also that's the next page actually. And so the refraction is causing looming. Because it's only a minor effect, of course, but nonetheless it is there. And surveyors, there are lots of videos on YouTube if you want to go and look into this about what surveyors have to do with dealing with looming, and they do something called applying. Right, actually I did. So yes, so and this affects things like what the sunrise and sunset. When you're looking at the sun, sunrise and sunset is going through that highly refractive, sort of dense layer. It's not actually where you think it is. That sun there, for instance. Say what you see. Is it there? It's there. I can see it. See it. It must be there. I can see it. No, it's not there actually. It's a good few. I can't remember I meant to go and get the exact. And this is another thing from Al. You can see the inversion layer here causing it to invert the bottom bit, but nonetheless, the whole sun, up to a certain point, it's also stretched slightly. It's non-linear. Means that the sun is not actually at that position. It's actually slightly, in real life, it's actually lower. And they actually allow for this in things like timeanddate.com to tell you when the sunrise and sunset occurs. They actually allow for this and put a standard sort of refraction in to say, so they get it closer to, because otherwise people are saying, well, I'm getting these tables for sunrise and sunset, and I'm seeing it much earlier than I should, or it's going down much later, or not much, by a minute or something. And so they actually allow for this in the various things as corrections. So this is an established thing. And also the refraction changes with your inclination, your elevation. And in fact, so much so that, for instance, astronomers don't like to look. This is a degrees altitude, the apparent altitude in degrees. So this is 40 degrees. If you're looking up into the sky at 40 degrees, the actual refraction changes because of the effect of the change in density of the air. And astronomers, for several reasons, just about refuse to look at anything below about 20 degrees. That's also because they're looking through more air, and obviously they're not interested in looking through air. They want to look through the thing. So obviously, if you're going down low, you're looking through a lot more air. But they also don't like the refractive effects of looking low. And sailors, when they're trying to do calculations, refuse to do anything under 10 degrees, which is when here, because you're getting this sort of refractive. This is only in is it arc minutes or something? Yeah, arc minutes. So it's still small, but it's changing dramatically. And Mick West did a marvelous video on how you can actually witness this change of refraction according to the angle. He was watching a star at sunrise. So of course, any star will do this. At sunrise, come to a sunset. Sorry, and he, what you'll see is the stars and things appear to slow down. So what he did, he took samples every second of the position of a star coming towards sunset, and he then extrapolated out here with this little chart of his what would happen. So the blue one, so if you take the speed of, and obviously the Earth is maintaining its rotational velocity, but that doesn't change. So the speed of the star's movement across the sky is going to be the same, but when it comes towards the horizon, it will change. It will start to suddenly slow and seem to sort of hover, effectively. If you extrapolate the speed, you'll get the blue dots here. So this is speed from here to here, carried on in 1 second things. But the red dot reflects what actually happened, and it slows down. And that's because they're reflecting this graph here, that the looming, it's effectively looming. I mean, here it's quite possible that's actually below the horizon. Well, actually, no, there's the red one there, show where it should be. So it's just about to dip below the horizon in real life, but it's well up here, which means in the next stage, the red one, blue one will be down, and the red one, it'll still be, you'll be able to see something's actually below the horizon. Yeah. Right now, also another real world thing. So we've seen some real world effects there of the consequences of refraction. And my friend George Natty, who last year who spent months doing what he and I thought would be a simple test, testing the curvature of the Earth, had it get involved in an epic piece of experimentation, and he came up with this marvelous idea of using. He lives next to this lake, which is frozen in the winter, and it means he's got a nice smooth surface, and he can then because when it freezes, of course, because obviously the problem everyone would like to use a piece of water and then put things along it. But of course, that's problematic because you need a boat or something, or you need a bridge or something that, Pontchartrain Bridge, you could probably do it. But you then need to know your position. Soundly is trying to emulate this in some ways with his trying to get the water level. So what George did, he rather cleverly thought, what I can do is I can drill through the ice, find the water level, so that I then know exactly where these things should be. But also, so effectively, you're mounting something on water, but you've got this nice solid layer of snow and ice to stick it on, to actually position the devices. But you can measure down to the water, because you want this water, because that's the only thing that's equipotential, that's at the same level. Because obviously, if you do this with land, you've no idea whether the land is wiggling up and down here. So what George is doing is sticking these pipes underneath the ice, so he's measuring the water level. So it doesn't even matter what the ice is doing; it could be going up and down like crazy. George was actually moving these poles up and down to make contact with the water. So he's got this marvelous thing up. So it doesn't matter if this is wiggling or whatever. He's going down to the water. And then he can make sure they're all at the same level. And then he was having a look at what happened to them over a distance of 2.3 miles. And here you can see in the distance, this is George's reference pole here at the back there. And he then made these targets, and he put them at 1 mile difference. So the difference, in other words, that the mile between that pole and that pole. And then this pole here is 1.5 miles away from that pole, and this one here is 2.3 miles from the reference pole. And he's right next to the border, and he's often thought of running off to Canada when Trump makes a really stupid tweet, but he seems to keep on going back to the USA. And then he was using equipment. This isn't actually what he used. I lost all my crashing today. I had to quickly grab this image here. And this is he was using a theodolite, something similar to it, to look through, to put some crosshairs on things. And now what George has also cleverly done is he's actually made these targets at different heights and different sizes, so they appear to be the same size, even though they're very different distances. And so this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like through his theodolite. This is the middle. This is one in the middle. Is 1 mile away. Okay, I've cocked this up. I think that's 1 mile away, and that's something else. I can't remember what that is now. That's 1.5 miles away. Bloody hell, this one comes along. Check my... Right, so that one there is 1.5 miles away. This one is 1 mile away, and this one is 2.3 miles away. They look the similar size because George has increased the size of the targets to allow for that. And he's, after a lot of work, a lot of messing about, and really a lot of running around, charging around on ice, running backwards and forwards at these 2 3 miles in his car. Nearly, oh God, I can't spell target. He managed to align them all and find out what the zero refraction condition was. And he's put and he set the theodolite at that position, and he's got all the targets. He moved them up and down to get them into the zero configuration. And then, oh look, this was a rare event. He actually got the reverse refraction. This is very unusual. And it was so it actually went down and not up. In other words, it's doing the opposite of looming. So that was an interesting thing. But this is what's happening normally, because he was obviously during the day. So this idea of standard refraction, George is demonstrating here. He's witnessing non-standard refraction. This is an obsession the flat earthers have. They think, well, you have standard refraction, which I think I'm going later, and non-standard refraction. Well, George is having here something that's non-standard, but it's very, very slight off non-standard. And so we're getting a little bit more, we're getting a bit of looming here. So all 3 targets, and they're going to move differently, of course, because they're all going to be refracted slightly differently. And so here, the far away target, as you'd expect, that's the one in the middle, the 2.3 miles, is looming more than the others. And so we're getting a separation now between them. And unfortunately, George only managed to get this all going right before the ice started to melt, although he'd been working on it for 2 months and things. It was epic. He was trying to get thermistor values in, and the conditions weren't right, and he had to build these targets and things, and it was an epic 2 months. So the idea that people have that they can just go and do these sorts of things in a day. George, who was very clever and very engineering orientated, very thorough, and very capable. It was quite a struggle to do that in the time available. And then the situation changed, the conditions changed, and he had to. And all these things are melting and things. It's just as epic as an epic story to be told in a video that I meant to make. I should have made about a few months ago and haven't, and I will do in the next month or so. So, but when later on he had to remove the targets because they all started melting, he was able to then also keep his zero refraction condition crosshair, and he noticed that it crossed this point here, this join here, and so he was able to monitor this even without the targets. And he actually went out and measured how far it was from the cross member here, the supporting beam here, down to the join between the snow and the ice. And so he knows that this is 10.5 feet. And so you can see here the crosshair has jumped down here. So this is, in other words, this is looming. He hasn't moved the crosshairs. The crosshairs have not moved. What's happened is that the image in the background has moved up. It's looming. And you can see it's becoming quite significant here. This is now looming well above the crosshairs. And to the point, it goes even more. And to the point here where the crosshairs are down here, which is actually 10.5 feet from where it should be. It's got a bit blurry there, but that's 10.5 feet. That's 0.043 degrees, which is 1/10 of the size of the moon at the angular size there. So as well, and this is only over 2.3 miles. So refraction, which both George and I were a bit shocked as to how significant this was, and we now understand why surveyors are terrified of refraction. This is longer than most surveyors would work over, but the 2.3 miles, and it's jumping up and down by 10 feet. Bloody hell. And it's 10% of the size of the moon. This is a significant thing. Right, so this is something that just is absolutely maddening. The flat earthers often say, well, it's non-standard refraction. You either have standard refraction or you have mirages. No, as I've just demonstrated above here, everything is on a spectrum. And what they get excited about is things like that they think of refraction. The only way they recognize is stuff like this. Oh, why? You bastard, what are you on? Why have you? Right. They only recognize, whoops. They only recognize refraction as doing strange things, amazing things, as they call it. They do not believe in subtleties, or this, or this. They call that refraction. But they just completely ignore. They think you either get that or nothing. And oh, there's one amazing picture that shows I've got up here, which shows. Oh, here we go. This one here is well worth a look. This shows, I've overlaid here a Google image. And hopefully, if I click on that, am I going to transparent? There we go. There's the image. That's what they saw. It looks sort of okay, doesn't it? Sort of, you know, okay, is that real? Oh, no. Because that is what it should be. And you can see that it's distorted. It's actually compressed. This building here is down here. So it demonstrates two things, this thing. First of all, as proof of obviously of a spherical Earth, because these buildings are actually below the waterline. And obviously, you wouldn't expect that on a flat Earth. But similarly, there's actually a lot of compression. This part here, from the tip to the base, this is not refracted at all. But below that, because the proportions are the same, this proportion of this is still the same in Google Earth. This is a Google Earth image overlaid on it. You can see there's no change at the top of the tower, but down below, all these buildings are looming. So what we're doing is we're getting looming only from this point downwards. It's non-linear, which I think is a marvelous demonstration of the sorts of effects you can get here, as well as proving the spherical Earth. You get this compression. That's actually called towering, where you get a non-linear effect in your thingy. So refraction comes in all shapes and forms, and George had a lot of problems. It was amazed by it. It caused him enormous problems with him trying to do his experiment. Yes, the classic question the flatard might ask, well, hold on, if you've got looming, why doesn't everything loom? Why can't you see everything? If you can see, if we're getting some looming here, which is what we're going to be talking about in a minute, of objects coming higher than you expect using the straight line geometry I was showing you earlier, they're saying, well, why can't we see everything? Why, in that picture that we saw, is there a gap between those two built on the right hand side of the Isle of Man? Why can't we see everything? Why can't we see everything? What's the problem? If we've got looming, why can't we see everything? It's because, of course, as I say here, it seems though flat earthers they think of they're almost like in a quantum minds. You know, until the quantum physics, we thought everything came in everything was graduated, speed, velocity, and everything else. You could go down to an infinitely small resolution. Things go from one state to another, energy, speed, momentum, etc., etc. But no, flat earthers seem to have got the sort of quantized view of the world ahead of the game. It either works or it doesn't. You've got refraction or you haven't, or you see everything or you don't, or everything's what you see or it isn't. Whereas, of course, we demonstrate here there's a graduation here. And if refraction can do a little bit, it can loom things by a little bit, but it can't cause things to move by hundreds of meters. It can cause things to move by a few tens of meters over the horizon. Or in the case of the sun, it's an angular effect, of course, which means obviously the further away you can do more, but it's an angular effect. And so just because you can move things like the Morgold Lighthouse, which we'll be looking at in a second, goes up and down by a little bit, doesn't mean to say it's going to move up and down things like the areas that require hundreds of meters. I mean, the arguments they use is just extraordinary. You wouldn't have thought you'd have to explain that to a child, would you? You don't, just because it's like saying you can only have a car 0 to 100 miles an hour. No, you can run it at 50 miles an hour, or 10 or 20 or 30. There's a whole graduated range there. And it just so happens that the range of normal refraction will loom a little bit, but it won't loom enough to bring things like Ramsey into view. So how does that affect the maths? What does this do to our equation that we had? You may remember this some time ago. This is the equation we worked out for the hidden. Now, I was going to go for a whole great wad of explanation here, but I lost 2 or 3 hours work on this, unfortunately. What does it do to our equation that relied on straight lines? Well, actually, he's a very clever person called Andrew Long. You should go and look at this. There's a whole amazing site all about this. And other people have of this as well. And you can see here the effects of refraction, which are achieved. Fortunately, the end result of refraction, what you can do, just so happens that the maths ends up that you can change, you can multiply in this equation I've got here, you can multiply the radius of the Earth, you assume, by a factor, and that actually incorporates the curve of the light. It's an amazing construction, but it just so happens to end up you're multiplying by a factor, and that factor multiplies by the radius. It's not actually much changing the radius. It's just so comes up, the maths comes out that that's what you can do, which makes it very, very easy. So you can just start sticking in where you've got r, you can start multiplying it by this 7/6, which is the standard refraction. But it's no, they're just assuming it. It could be 1.2, which would be slightly bigger, or different places would have a different value of the refraction. They've just got to pick on a value that surveyors use, and they tend to pick on some of these, but not all of them, and not in all worlds do they do that. But so that means, and you can see the difference here. This is, for instance, we've got two graphs here of the ones I was showing you earlier, of what happens for a zero height observer and a 35-meter one. And you can see, for instance, if we varied a refraction, say from 7/6 to 1.35, that will cause a change between them. And obviously, if you had none, I haven't got the graph actually here for zero refraction, but I've got here the two different values of refraction showing you the differences. So, for instance, here at 30,000 odd, you can see that it would make a difference of about 10 meters, depending on which one of these two values of refraction you think might be appropriate. And of course, you know, if you have it's going to be dependent on the weather. So, for instance, it could be that on Anthony's day, he had a cold sea and a warm air, or vice versa, and that will dramatically, well, not dramatically, it will affect it to the order of a few tens of meters. Oh yes, this is an amazing one. One of the arguments that flat earthers, particularly Anthony Riley, says is that because in soundless videos things move up and down, and all this explanation I've just been giving is all flawed because I haven't mentioned that refraction can occur up. Well, yes, it can, but it's not relevant. You know, I haven't mentioned, as I say here, I haven't mentioned the possibility of a black hole being here as also affecting refraction. But I haven't mentioned the black hole because it's not relevant, and I haven't mentioned it refracting up because it's not relevant. And his argument that it is relevant is that he's seen some videos of Soundly, of the Lake Pontchartrain. The lights go up and down. So he's saying, oh, but it's being refracted up. It's not just being refracted down. This poor guy doesn't understand the difference between relative movement and absolute movement. So if we, I'm going to have this little diagram perhaps might help. So here we have a thing curving down. And so that's a curving down, this thing. But what happens if it curved down a little bit less? Oops, I've clicked the whole bloody thing. Oh, there we go. It's still curving down in both cases, but it's moved up in that case. Does that mean that's curving up? No. It's relatively moved up, but it's still curving down. So you can get movements going up and up, even if things are curving down. I mean, Jesus Christ, would you think you'd have to explain this to an adult? It's like saying your bank account's in deficit. It can go up, but it's still in deficit. I mean, oh, Jesus. I mean, they don't understand the difference between relative and absolute positions. And if they see some relative movement, they think they've got an absolute movement. I mean, these guys are, oh, God. And then this idea of negligible. Unfortunately, Anthony Riley has seen something using the word negligible in it and saying that refraction is negligible. I've already shown graphs here which show that it's not negligible. It's moving. Well, see, the thing is, the paper that he's referring to is worrying about the sorts of effects I showed you earlier with the supertanker going up and down. They're trying to model, they're graphics engineers, software programmers, and they're trying to emulate these dramatic effects. So they regard standard refraction as not being at all interesting. They call that negligible. It's not important to them. It's not going to affect their graphics program. They're trying to emulate things jumping up and down and inverting and mirages. So they're not interested. This, as far as they're concerned, it's negligible. But of course, poor old Anthony sees the word negligible and doesn't realise that it's a context-sensitive term. And for them, it's negligible. But for us, because we're worried about, as you may recall from the scale I showed of the Earth, tiny changes in angle are causing tens of, we're worrying about tens of meters, you know, a few meters, about less than 10 meters. Well, to us, that's significant. But to the people writing this program, that's irrelevant, negligible. I mean, again, why I'm having to explain this is just, one thing we do know that's negligible, though, is Riley's understanding of reality and his reasoning skills. That's something we know absolutely is true. Right, so we now know how to apply that equation in a refraction case. So we've got an equation for the for what happens to light. We now know what the spherical Earth model will say something, what should happen. So great. So now we finally got to the point where we know what the 3D geometry is going to say about where things should be, and we've got the image to work out what's happening. So other piece of information we need to know from that equation, if you remember that we were the equation that we're going to use to apply this one here with our refraction correction, you can see that it's only got three pieces of information, or two variables. It's only got the distance to the object, the radius of the Earth, and the altitude of the observer. Well, we know the radius of the Earth. That's great. That's fixed. And we know we're going to vary the distance to the destination for what we're looking at. But that just depends on what we're looking at. The thing we now is absolutely crucial, as we mentioned before, is the altitude of the observer. So if we're going to apply this, we need to know what Antony's altitude was. And this, of course, has been something that he's either deliberately or, well, God, being difficult about anyway, because he thinks he's allowed to say, if Google Earth says I'm at 35 feet, I'm at 35 feet. And he's going to stick by that, even though the visual evidence, as you saw already from those pictures of where he was, indicate that's not the case. So he seems to be more interested in challenging Google Earth. And in fact, Nathan said much the same thing. He said, we're trying to invalidate Google Earth. Well, we don't give a toss on the spherical side, whether Google Earth is wrong, right, or indifferent. We're interested in reality. That's what we're concerned with. It doesn't matter whether we had the model of the Earth before Google Earth came along. That's the model we're concerned with, not what Google Earth is doing. Google Earth has some problems, unfortunately. And of course, they use Google Earth because they can have it on their desktop and they can use it easily. Unfortunately, it's not very accurate. It's not accurate within 30 meters. And that's because it's based upon a shuttle mission called the SRTM, Shuttle Radar Topography Mission, which you can see at the left here, involved in sticking out a boom, and getting an accuracy of 1 degree. But they only released the 30 degree. And in fact, initially I thought that over the UK, we had a resolution of 1 arc minute. But in fact, it turns out we only got it to 3. The Americans got it to 1 arc minute, which means that, so this is what I'm imagining a little conversation here with a moron. They say, you often see them say, well, how can Google Earth be wrong? Isn't that your model? Well, no, as I said before, it's not accurate to within a few tens of meters, but it is valid for that. If you're prepared to say that Google Earth you're interested in only accuracy of 10 meters, then Google Earth is fine. It's just like if you're using a small scale map. You don't invalidate the small scale map because you've got a large scale map. You just use the small scale map where it's appropriate. Both are valid. So Google Earth is perfectly fine if you're prepared to accept it's only accurate within plus or minus 30 meters. And then they say, well, how do you know it's approximate? Well, they say so. They say in the information it's only accurate to plus or minus 30 meters. And although I've written down here that it's horizontal resolution 90 meters, because in fact that was based on the American data, they're actually doing it to 90 meters. So although I've said they've released the information in 2015 for 30 meter resolution data. So if you can see on the thing to the left here, this is a map of St. Bees Head, which is close to where Anthony was doing. This box around the HUD is a 90 meter box, and you can see the contours on the map here. So the sample that the information that Google Earth are doing is based around this 90 meter box. And you can see, sitting on a cliff edge like Anthony was, it's got no hope in hell of doing that. And in fact, there's a plaque on St. Bees Head where they say on it that there's 85 meters high. If you go on Google Earth, it says 48 meters high. That's 37 meters difference. 37! That's even bigger than their discrepancy claim. And so Google Earth basically is not very accurate. It's certainly not accurate enough for our reasons. And they want to know why. And I think I mentioned here that the arc second was the resolution. And so obviously things like Ordnance Survey is much more accurate, and in fact even Google say go and use your Ordnance Survey information. And in fact, yes, there's a load of stuff on the Google Earth. If you want to, excuse me. If you want to go to the Google Earth forums, they discuss this accuracy issue quite a lot. And for instance, there was a big argument at one point about the height of the Morgold. So here's a picture of the Morgold Lighthouse. And the Google Earth thing says that the Google Earth thing says it's only 23 meters high. If you go and look at Google Earth, go to the Moorgard Lighthouse, it says it's 23 meters high. I was arguing that on the Ordnance Survey map it was much higher. So there was a big dispute about this. So I emailed the Ordnance Survey people about the height of the lighthouse. They said, actually, Ordnance Survey UK don't do the Isle of Man. I then had to email the Isle of Man mapping service, and the mapping service of the Isle of Man, they used the LiDAR data that I mentioned earlier. And this guy in his office, a head cartographer, went away and found out where the base of this lighthouse was for me. And he told me, based on the LiDAR data, which is incredibly accurate, that it was 43.7 meters above mean sea level, because all measurements are above mean sea level. And he then told me that, but actually there's possibly the mean sea level the Isle of Man uses is actually 0.5 meters difference from the Isle of Man, from the height used on the rest of the UK. So I know very, very accurately how high this the base of this thing is of this lighthouse. But Google Earth says it's only 23 meters above the base. So, it's out by 20 meters or so. I know just some text here about the fact how hard you have to work to actually, in the 1930s, there was a retriangulation of Britain, and they had to build 6,500 of these triangulation points, and involving building concrete things into mountains and things. And they had to take 32 readings a day for any one point to avoid refraction issues, and they try and do it at night and in the evening and things, etc., to avoid the refraction issues. These people, the information in Ordnance Survey is much, much more accurate. And Google say this. Google say, go and look at your Ordnance Survey thing. But the morons, the fat earther morons, don't like that answer. Presumably because it's the information they can get is on the in Google Earth. So that's what they will. That's what they will do. They just like going to Google because it's convenient on their computer. And here we have the resolution information for the Ordnance Survey, and it's within 3 centimeters on the Isle of Man. It's even more accurate around the rest of Great Britain, but on the Isle of Man it's 3 centimeters. And you can go and find that out from the so the question is, Anthony Riley and co want to use something that's not accurate to within 30 meters. I'm keen on using something that's accurate to 3 centimeters. So which one do you think we should use? I wonder. Okay, I will think on that one. And of course, they just want to use what's on their computer. They're not really interested in accuracy. They just want to believe what they want to believe. Right. So we've established now that we need to be not using Google Earth so much. Treat it with caution. So this is how we're going to get the height of the observer. It's one other point here. Just another demonstration of the errors in Google Earth. Here's a profile in Google Earth of a piece of land here, and you can see here that there's a rather odd drop of 13 meters, which is just simply an error in the data. And you'll see this all the time if you use a Google Earth. You'll see these drops. They can easily be 20 meters. So there's no, the idea of using Google Earth versus Ordnance Survey is a non-starter. You'd be an absolute idiot to do so. But they're absolute idiots. And of course, they want to do that because it gives them information. Well, in Anthony's case, of course, it gives them a lower height. So you can see here we've got we've clearly got some join here between 2 different bits of data, presumably a different scan, shuttle going over one and then the other, and they've got to match these 2 together. And you can see there's some strange effect here, presumably something to do with the angle at the extreme edge of that particular scan that was causing it to go up. Right, and so that's where the 30-meter resolution comes in. So we can basically say you use the Ordnance Survey where possible. Absolutely guaranteed. Okay, this is some information about. So we need to find out where he was. This is for the first video, which he claimed to be at one point turned out to be quite considerably different, but we won't worry about that. Then for the second video, which is the one that the composite that we're using came from, he initially claimed it was very close to the first one, and that he couldn't remember quite where it was on that cliff face. But people have seen this before. So we tried to establish exactly where he was using this. This is a view from the second video. And we can actually compare it with the first video, which I won't bother to do, overlaid the images, and you can see they're very different. So it's here. Right, so here we need to find out where Anthony was, and we can see the shape here from the second video of these rocks and this peculiar sort of rock line here against this thing here. And fortunately, there are some pictures. For some reason, someone's very methodically, about half a kilometre out, taken pictures of the St. Bees area looking in. And so we can see the same rocks and thing features here. And you can see that's exactly the same shape here. And it's just along from where Anthony was. And he initially was over on the left-hand side here. And then he sort of said, well, I was somewhere between there and this area of the highest point. But he sort of implied he was here doing something. And now it's under pressure. Finally, he's now admitted that he's where I've calculated him to be, which is there, which is just underneath a local high point. And you know, there's all this evidence I did about the fact that he may have claimed that these rocks were there temporarily, but in fact these were taken from 2013. They don't move. And so if you look at the Ordnance Survey map with a 5-meter resolution, you can see that he was, that's where his first video was. And I worked out that he was then. Miles Davis and Al then went there and they confirmed, so this is zoomed in here, they confirmed, they took a video from the same point, and they confirmed that indeed he was very close to the local high point, probably just about 5 feet, I think we decided in the end. Looking at where the position of his camera, we can see that he's more close to the end of the cliff. And so this is where his first video was taken. This is where that's a local high point. This is where the second video was taken from, the reluctantly thing. And actually on Google Earth, I think this only shows there's some ridiculously low thing. If you add on the tripod and the tide, which you have to add on to the observer height, you end up with 35 meters. I think actually, subsequently, given what Miles Davis told me, I think I could up that to 35.5. So that is the height based on the Ordnance Survey thing here, because we know he's there, very close to the 33-meter point. Add on the tripod, add on the 2.5 meters of tide, which we happen to know existed on that day, because he was there at low tide, and the tide on that day was, we know that it was varying by 5 meters. Add those together, you then finally find out that he's got an observer height of 35 meters. And subsequently, Anthony has confirmed, he's even pointed on a map, that that's where he was on the second video, although he claimed that's only where he was on the third video. But so he's admitted now he's there. Now it's a question of, now he's admitted where we've pinned him down to. He wants to use the Google Earth data, which says it's only some ridiculous, I think it's only 35, I can't remember now, what, 35 feet or something. Yes, and here it just demonstrates what the Google Earth error is. Potentially for this area, and it swamps everything. It's just so you just do not, and obviously with a cliff face like this, you just can't have something that's got enough. You know, the shuttle is scanning at 90-meter distances, so there's no way that you can. It's going to have any chance of working out. It's going to take an average of those two. So it's no chance in hell. Only think something with a surveying thing and this local high knowledge of this local high point, are you going to get any chance of any height? But of course, Anthony just wants to persist with, I'll just go what Google Earth says, completely ignoring the points. He knows he's already absorbed the points and been told the points I've made about the errors and the fact that Google indeed say that they are not accurate within 30 meters, but he just ignores it. Now you can argue that's just willful stupidity. It's looking to me as though it's rather more than that now. And this gives another view again where the local high point and that's where he seemed to be. Right. So now we know how high he is. We've got all elements in that equation that we need. We know the distance to things. We know his observer height. We can then start doing calculations on things. And here's the composite. And again, and how do you identify what things are in the picky? Well, the first thing to do is to use the bearings thing that we worked out. And then you can do things like an elevation check using the vertical thing that I showed you earlier. And you can use using some maths in that. You can then work out how high above the horizon it should be. You can also do things like check the angular size of things. So, for instance, you could do things like check the angular height of that. See if that matches using my little vertical measure. You can then check the side of that, or how high things are above the. And one thing I did was the width of this house, which worried me initially because it wasn't wide enough when I was identifying this thing. And of course, then I'd forgotten that in fact we're looking at it at about 40 degrees. And if you just do a sine calculation on that, it's great. So I was able to confirm that thing had the right height, right width. So even if you get something nice and white like that, you can do a width check on it. You can also do an angular size check and say, you know, so it's so many degrees between things. And also you can do an angular size, angular distance between different things on there to work out between nearby objects. And so you can also, if you know the distance, then you can actually work how big that is. So for instance, because I knew the bearing to this this house here, I knew the distance, therefore I was able to identify where it was, and this is the infamous Bala Canal. I was able to identify how far it was away, and therefore how big it should be. Once you, because while following that geometry, remember that little spherical geometry thing, S times the distance times the angle, you can then work out how big that is, and so you can confirm how big something should be, and also the distances between things. So for instance, I can say, for instance, which will become important later, how the distance between that of those set of 4 objects there from one side to the other. If I know the angle between them, using my little scale down here, and the distance which you can work out to them, you can say how far apart they are. You can check that. You can also obviously do visual match, and this is the only thing, of course, the flat earthers can do, because they haven't got to grips with the bearings at all. The only thing they're capable of doing is matching shapes. Now, I put that at the bottom here because everything else, when you've got dealing with blurry images, you can, anybody's any familiar with the way image processing works and what have you, you know that many things can look like many different things. It's also the other thing you need to do is to check the elevation. So it's an important thing to know, and one thing I will be going to in just a second is that I didn't do when I was asked immediately to identify these 4 houses. I didn't, because I was just off the cuff said I know the right bearing, but I didn't do an elevation check and got caught out. Right, and also where relative things are, we expect them to be relative to other things. So for instance, what will become important here later on is that this, for instance, this set of trees, how far the angle is away from this set, on this little blob down here, how far that is away from that, or from this this white building I've identified here, and you make sure those are all consistent. None of that, of course, flat earthers do none of that at all. They just simply, well, very occasionally do something slightly. They say, oh, there should be this town or something next to this, but that's about the limit of it. Right, so those are the checks that you should employ, and then this is the, and there are about 7 places that I decided to take an interest in, that are related also to the points they were taking an interest in, the flat earthers were taking an interest in. And one of the first ones was actually this tuft of trees here, which became important because it was claimed to be above Douglas. If you remember, this was assigned as being Douglas here, and therefore this tuft of trees, which was claimed to be above Douglas. And so how do you go about identifying that? Well, obviously, the first thing you do is you're going to do a bearing check and see if there are any woodland along that line. And of course, if you do that, whoops, you do a bearing check. And also, of course, you can do a height check, although I didn't do at the time. You can say, is the height compatible on here with that? And it just turns out that, although I didn't do that initially, it is. And then on the bearing line is this tuft of trees here. And interestingly, there's that little hole there in it, which will become relevant in a second. And the bearing, so we've got a bearing on this thing. Because we were trying to identify this tuft of trees. And we know, therefore, because of the bearing, that we've got Bala Canal down here, and we've got Baldrine here. And also, we can check the visibility. That shouldn't be there. Oh, fudge. We can check the visibility using the profile facility in Google Earth. You don't rely on it, of course, but you can do other things like the Ordnance Survey thing, which I did do. It's going to check the height of this, and then you can work out whether there's visibility to the observer point. And so once you've got the bearing right, you can then know from the what the height should be. You can then work out, say you've identified it and got the distance, and whether it's visible. So you check the visibility as well, because I mean, either this one, that might be quite reliable in Google Earth, but just don't rely on it. Go and if there's any sort of possible confusion, go and use the Ordnance Survey map, which I've got a very high resolution version of acquired. And here is a great shot from Al, who went to the same spot as Anthony, and he took a shot of this, and you can see the tuft of trees here shape. He took this from a much lower level, but nonetheless he got the shot of the tuft of trees, as we call it, with the hole in it. And because it's lower down, and you can see again that matches this little damage done here, which will become important. And Alex geo-spotted. Well, I was aware of it, but he's the one who used it as a very useful way of doing something. Right, so that we've identified the tuft of trees there. So the next thing are these 4 blobs, and this is where I got into a minor bit of trouble when I just tried to do it off the cuff. These 4 blobs to the left of the tuft of trees, I was asked to identify, and I said, well, I can get the bearing, and then I had a quick look at the bearing here. I thought, oh look, there are 4 houses here. Look at that. There's the tuft of trees. There are 4 houses, and Sly Sparkane had a go identifying these recently, and got into a little bit of trouble himself. And so off the cuff, you think, well, it's actually 7 houses in Google Earth, and they've got the right bearing, or just about, not far off. You've got 4, so you think 4 white blobs, bearing's correct, go for it. But of course, if you do an elevation check, oops. Well, actually, if you go through the checks that I just mentioned above, this is what it looks. This is what the close view looks like of those 4 houses. And you can do something like say, well, here we go. Only some of these can be seen, because obviously this one is blue trees and this one you can't see this one. So you can imagine that possibly that one's too small to be seen. That one. You have to make a lot of that. When you do a Google bugger, I forgot what it's really called now. Google on the road. I just forgot my damn names. Google Drive thing. Bugger. You can check the angular width of this, which I didn't do when I was asked off the cuff, to see how the span of those 4 houses, and also the height. And this is where they were on the map, those 4 houses. And you can go and look at that accurately. And actually, the Google Earth actually agrees with the. So these are the 4 houses that I've seen there along the road from Balacanal to Baldream. And the road indicates, unfortunately, they're at 70 or 80 meters, which if you do the calculation, that formula that I showed above, and also because the Metabunk thing does something similar to that formula. As I said, it's very simple. So you can actually use Metabunk hidden calculator as well, and it will say they're hidden. And indeed, when you go and pump those numbers, that elevation in, you find they're hidden. So we've got another problem is the fact that this width here that I've got 0.2 degrees. Unfortunately, if you go back to my thing up here, you'll see that unfortunately this is only different by 0.1. It's got 6.4 here to 7.4. So those are only different by 0.1 of a degree. These are actually 0.2 of a degree. So that's twice as wide. And it's too low. And so if you do the various checks, angular size check, elevation check, we did the bearings, that's the only thing I based it on, you find, oops, lots of problems with those being the thing. And if you actually go and do the actual size checks as well, that fails. And obviously, yes, the buildings above, yes, because also there are things above those buildings in Google Earth here that should be visible. If those are visible, then there are other things here that should be visible, which are not visible. There's nothing above it in the picture. There's nothing above those 4 blobs, and it's very close to the angle of the skyline of the brow of the hill. So it fails on all accounts. You then say, oh, okay, and we'll give up on that. So how do you go about doing it? Well, I was looking at this with Alex afterwards, and he reinforced this thing about the hole in the tuft of trees, and he also noticed this white blob down here. I think, oh, okay, wonder what that might be. And it turns out that below the tuft of trees in the same line, this blob here is directly in line. That blob there is directly in line with the hole in the tuft of trees. I think, that's interesting. So Alex was hot on the case on that one, and but also interestingly, it's on the same level, same you think, oh, that's rather interesting. That's on the same contour line, if it's at the same distance, which is liable to be given the same sort of area as the 4 blobs. And no, what I could have done, I mean, obviously, if I've got some better tools now, I bothered to go and check the elevations thing. I could have said exactly what elevation I expect, but because we were just sort of doing it live, we then able to then say, well, okay, what is on the same contour here? Oh, what's this thing here? This Bruce Farm thing. Oh, look, it's on 155, and then you go and do the calculations, which I've got over here, and it turns out that it's if you compare that, if you work out the distance, if you do if you do the calculation about how high it is above the horizon, you say that it's exactly in the right spot. This farm is in exactly the right spot. It's within, 2 or 3 meters, 2 or 3 meters or so, depending on what level of fraction you decide to pick. It can be exactly on, slightly above, slightly below, but within a few meters. That's how accurate. That's how accurate we can be. Within a few meters, this is on. That's how close it's agreeing with reality. But then you might get some clever. So here's the picture. Here's the picture on looking down on that particular farm, and you can see it doesn't look like 4 blobs, does it? Yes, you think, oh God, but it's exactly the right width. It's exactly the right height. And in fact, I'll show you in a second, you could have picked the farm just below, which someone else did actually recently, is trying to identify it. No, too low. And this is what it actually looks like from Google. I've forgotten the stupid name of the damn thing. So you can see, in fact, there are separate 4. There's one hidden behind there you can't see, but you can see that there's a separate. It doesn't look like the aerial photograph doesn't do it any justice, and you can see how proud that is and how close to the brow of the hill it is. And so there are 4 things there, so in exactly the right spot. And when you go around the side of Bruce, this is Bruce Farm, you can see again the 4, how close they are to the brow. And there's the tuft of trees there, and these are the four things. And St. Bees is to our right, and we're looking northeast, I think here. Yeah, no, northeast is to the right. We're looking. Yeah, anyway, we're on the brow there. So this is the situation. Here is the Bruce Farm. There's the tuft of trees. This is Baldrain down here. This is the other thing below it, and that's the profile. Just do an extra check, that you've got visibility. You can go work out the calculation using hidden about this line here. But I didn't have time to do that. So you can get the angle, but you can see it's on the brow of a hill. It's visible. It's above the indicated hidden. And I was trying to do a very clever thing where I've actually worked out, I've got a tool now where you can just feed in the elevation profile and actually do it tells you what's visible at a particular height. So where these cross, so without actually having to do any of that messing about, I can just say, if I know the distance, this actually tells me for a particular distance down along the bottom where the hidden occurs or where the height. So if you feed in the pixel height in your image, I can then do a graphical intersection of where that pixel height will meet the contour. So you can do it all automatically, but I haven't quite sorted that out. Now, some of them, I can just imagine now we've got Riley and Nathan and a couple of others going, no, you might have identified it, but look at the evidence, look at the evidence, look at the evidence, look at the evidence. There's this big town. There's this big town. You've got this farm here. Where? There's this big town, Baldrine. There's your 4 blobs. Where's this big where's Baldrine gone? There should be a big town down here. Should be a big town. You can't be right. You're wrong. Look at the evidence. Well, of course, if you actually go and look at the contours, and I've rather had to spend a lot of time calculating this. I've drawn a diagram here of what's hidden by working out on the contours and working out the distances and things. So there's Balrus Farm. And if you actually, because it's actually Baldrine is actually in a valley, and it's a very steep valley. And it turns out that Baldrine is almost all hidden except for a tiny bit just here. And there's some other areas. In fact, the bit you can see is here, if you follow the contours. So you have to look quite a lot. It's not just a matter of following the contours. So don't think I've just followed the contours here. No, that won't work. You have to allow for the hidden for a particular distance away. So you have to work out the distances. It's quite involved. Anyway, the upshot is that Baldrine will disappear. So that's why it's not there. Right. Then I went on to other places. There's a place here of interest to me anyway, because I just spotted it. And again, I'm using this calculation. I can work out from how far it is away, the distance. You can go into Google Earth or whatever to find out what the height is recorded. You add in the hidden, and you see if does the theory match the practice. In other words, do these 2 things match that? And of course, it does within about 10 meters. Sometimes, in fact, often better than that. So we've got the height in real life. So you go and find, I've identified this particular house from that bearing. Here's a blown up version of the calculation. And there's the house in question. You work, and also notice, by the way, of course, something I haven't been mentioning yet is the fact that this all works on the fact this is what's hidden. So, of course, this proves a spherical Earth straight away. We've got this much hidden, and it all conforms. If you work out the height, so if you know the height of this house, you know where the zero level is. So if you know that this is at this particular house is 191 meters, you know that therefore, using the calculation we were doing before about the height, you know this is where the sea level is in effect. This is where the shoreline would be if you could see the sea out there. You can see it's well below the horizon, which of course cannot happen on a flat Earth. It can only happen on a spherical Earth. So if you do the calculations and you check the compatibility, it's great. It's within about 5 meters. This is that house in Gelmona. There, if you check the elevation profile, it's a rather weird one. This is Gelmona. It's almost got a bumpy thing in front of it, but it's just proud of the line of sight. So this is the house in question in Gelmona. If you want the coordinates, you can see that I've put all the coordinates in of the heading, the distance, and the heights and things. And that's the house that on the right-hand side. Oh, and this is the White House in Balakanal. Right, so this is the one I was talking about earlier. Over here, this is our infamous Balakanal place again. So the way you identify it again, you say you want to know what's the bearing of this thing. So you find out the bearing on my little scale here. And you can see here, it's only got 4 meters above the horizon. And you then know what the hidden is. You can add those two together, compare that. And if you go into Google, actually Google is very good on this one. Google and the Ordnance Survey agree quite closely. It's 96 meters above sea level. And if you do the calculations on what spherical theory says, it says it's 95.6 or 97, 99.6, depending on which level of refraction you get. So it's within a few meters. That's how accurate we are. We're getting within 2 or 3 meters. That's how good we're doing. How well we're doing. I shouldn't say good, that wasn't right. And it's like, unfortunately, I've only half finished this, of course, because my computer crashed. So that's where Balakanal is. That's what it looks like. There's the White House. And there's another major error in Google Earth again. You know, this is also tens of meters. There's the building, the White House. It's actually 40 meters wide. But as I say, I was worried by the fact that white bit wasn't big enough. And then I realized that the line of sight came at an angle, and therefore it went down to the right size. That was I just happened to. Yes, that was a bit of a scary one. And then there's the Morgold Lighthouse, which is here, and I can do a check on the size. As I mentioned before, we can see how valid we are. I was able, by knowing the number of pixels, the number of degrees, I can work out what the height of this thing is, and therefore I also know how high it is above. And we can see that it's above the horizon by this much. And now, when you do the calculation on this one, remember, I've now been able to find out exactly how this from the LiDAR-based cartographers. There is a slight discrepancy of 13 meters using standard refraction. But if you assume slightly higher refraction, there is no discrepancy. So it's slightly more refraction, but it's only, we're only out of 13 meters. So all this idea of walls 1,000 meters high or being out by such and such and being huge amounts, no, we're only even in the standard refraction case. We're only out by 10, about 10 meters. That's all we're out by on the standard refraction case. And there just seems to be a little bit more refraction occurring on this one that gives us that extra. And if on the other values that I was going to try and present to everybody exactly what the level of refraction seems to be for that particular day, which of course it varies, just like George had. As I demonstrated, it's a variable. There's no fix, no reason why it has to be any particular value, just it has to be within a certain range. And it just so happens that there's a slightly more refraction on that day than standard that would account for the difference of this 10 meters of the Morgold Lighthouse. So we can account for that small discrepancy. And Douglas, oh yes, one thing, rather amusingly, you may remember that image of Balakanal, which in that image that they claimed was, where's Balakanal gone? Remember, this is Balakanal here. This supposedly is Douglas in there, although occasionally it becomes Baldrine, depending on which day of the week it is, according to the flat earthers. But you can just see this is, because I can measure this, I can know that's 26 meters wide. I can see the whole span of this town. I can see the angular width of it. And then you compare that to what Douglas, whoops. And then you compare that to what Douglas is, which is what they're claiming it is, or Baldrine, depending on, as I say. Look at this is what Douglas is, and this is what they claim to be able to see, this area here. But look at the scale of the objects, and look, see this thing, this bridge here? That's this. Vastly bigger than anything in the images that we, and it's just not, you can just see that the arrangement of little towns that we saw, those little blobs, are clearly residential, and they don't match this at all, as well as being obviously off to the left of the position. And also, Ali Kay and Miles Davis went there at night at one point, and they found about 3 or 4 lights coming out of Bala Canal. Excuse me, if that was Douglas, I think you might have just spotted a few more than just a few lights and the odd car going by. That's what it looks like in real life. Right, then we come to the issue of the right-hand-most island, right-hand-most side of the island, which they're claiming is you shouldn't be able to see, and it's part of Ireland. Now, there's a bit more substance to this. We've already dismissed going outside the bearing dimensions, and using our little calculator here, for instance, we can see. Unfortunately, I'm a little bit. This is something I haven't reviewed recently. There's a different. I think there's a discrepancy of 5 or 10 meters here on this one, if you use standard refraction, but it's fine if you use a slightly increased refraction to get the height of this. Is Shallag Point, which is over here, remember, on this island here, and which they were claiming initially was claimed not to be an island, but then they've changed their mind to this being part of Ireland or whatever. So if you do the calculations that we've used before, and you assume a tiny increase, well, moderate amount of increase in refraction, you can account for everything exactly. There's a difference of 10 meters with the standard refraction case. Now, right, this is quite interesting. When you go over to the right-hand side, yes, so Anthony's claim is that the body of the island is overlooked by, is actually part of Ireland, Northern Ireland, the mountains there. So although, so this is requires a little bit more fighting with, and you can see if you go into Google Earth from the correct line of sight, you can actually see there. This is a grab here that you can actually see the mountains actually along that line of sight. Unfortunately, you have to be at an elevation here of this is a very high elevation. I got a better one later on when I actually checked it thoroughly. This is what a zoomed in version from this is. Now this is using Google Earth correctly and to try and get the exact. Unfortunately, this is a bit of a mess because I lost lots of data and things. This is actually what would look like at something like 500 meters, I think. Unfortunately, I haven't got the. So those mountains in. Oh, here we go. There was a. This is what it looks like from 700 meters in the air. Those are the mountains of Northern Ireland in the distance. That's what they would look like at 700 meters, but they do not appear until. Yeah, I'm sorry, this is a bit of a mess because I just didn't have time to prepare this properly. But the upshot is that those mountains will not appear unless you're above 300 meters. They just start putting in appearance at 300 meters high. And what I can do here to prove that the island of Isle of Man accounts, as well as in Google Earth, of course, what you can do is you can put a polygon in between the two, and you can show that, in fact, all the things you can see in my high-res panorama here that I generate in Google Earth here. Oh, bloody thing. That I generated here. I can Google Earth accounts all of the body of land as being from the Isle of Man. So this one here, for instance, that's from 300 meters above there. So I did it at various heights, and I counted. Yes, so I was able to use Google Earth to account for all of the body that you could see, because I was able to come in using the proper zoom perspective position. But I was also able to do it from here on Google using Ordnance Maps and my own, because with that equation that we've got, and with the particular refraction, I can show you here. These are the hidden values for these particular positions. So, for instance, you can see here that you need to be this is for the standard. Right. This is what the height you need to be seen, to be above hidden. I've drawn in as radials here. So what you can do, and I mean to do this, is you can now go in here and say, look, if you're greater than 40, you can be seen, and you can look and then look at the contours here, and say, well, okay, this is shellac point, which Anthony was claiming you shouldn't be able to see, but you can see here that it's above. Using the contours here, we can see that it's above the 40 that's required, and you can also see places like here. There's 80 here. And that's 20, and you can see that the crucial part is Cranston. There's a bit 10 because it goes. You can see it goes back quite a way here. In fact, there's also stuff over here. I haven't checked this completely thoroughly, but it turns out there's things like 80 here. So, for instance, well above what's required to get the angle. And I can show what angles you do need to affect because I've drawn in the lines of sight. Here we go. Those are all the lines of sight from the starting. I think that one there, I only did this evening. That one there is 10 degrees below west. This one, so I haven't converted this into bearings, unfortunately. And so you can see that the area that it's going to occupy, that's going to match the requirements of being high, is going to sort of be along from about there. Of bits that are going to be visible, because you can match everything. So you see there's things above 40 going, and you have to go back to here as well, because some bits, and this is why it looks like this, he's got confused. This is why it looks slightly different. He's starting to claim these bits of Scotland, because the bits that don't connect very well is because there's a gap between them, and it goes, you have to go further back on the island I haven't actually done this calculation yet, and I could work out what that angular ratio was. In fact, it actually agrees, doesn't it? Because I think there's something back here. You see there's 80. So there you are, in fact, following this line of sight from Cranston, which we know is where the edge is, just before Cranston is where the right-hand edge. And if we take the next line, yeah, there we go, follow this line of sight here, and it hits this thing. It's at 80. So there you are. That's probably the right-hand most thing we can see. And you can see that's almost exactly in line with Cranston. The first time I've done this, because I've only just drawn these lines. I've only worked out how to put these lines in today, late this evening. So there you are. That's the right-hand edge there of the visibility. Will be that little point there, just there. Because as I say, I've drawn in what height you have to be using these radial rings this way, and you can look at the contours and then say, that must be visible because it's greater in height than the value on my rings here, and then the lines of sight show you. So there we are. So that's, if you recall, you may not recall, but it was Cranston was the right-hand most thing. And you can see, therefore, that's the most right-hand thing you can see. And so it occupies that area there. And if I go work out what that is, I bet in degrees, in fact, it's looking like, I think that's 10.1, 0.2. We could do this live, couldn't we? That looks like I think, is that, let's just see what that thing there, that's, what height is that? Is it 45? That might not be high enough. So possibly the width is going to be, might only be that. So you can see this is certainly, that's 70 there. There's no shellac point. So there, you can probably say, I think, that's 50 meters, I think, that line there. So that's 40. So probably that the leftmost point of, you can see, of this sort of iron to left is probably there, and that means we can say, I'm doing this live, that the angle of the rightmost section is going to be, I think these are 0.1. So let's have a look at that. Let's count that. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 24, 25, 24 probably. Yeah, probably 24. Probably 23 actually. So that means it's 0.23 angular width we're expecting to be for that right-hand section of the Isle of Man. So let's go and have a look at what that. Let's go and see what that is. That's probably where I'm probably going to get caught out here horribly trying to do this live. Never do anything live, of course. Let's go and see what. So 0.23 we make a note of. Let's go and have a look at it. We're saying it's going something with the bearings in it, on it. It's got bearings. Oh, no, what's wrong with bearings? There we go. So I'm saying it's going to be 0.23. I'm predicting. 2.3. Yes, 2.3. Sorry. And it's 1, 2.3. So there we are. So I've just confirmed there and then that width there is exactly matched by what I just did with the contour. So I've actually confirmed it with an Ordnance Survey topography live there. First time I've done that. So to justify, that's why you can see all of that land. It's 2.3 degrees wide. It's 2.3 degrees on the image as well. So it's a perfect account for why that's there. Brilliant. Right, I think that's it. That's the thing I did. Yeah, that was the last thing I did today. Oh, the Langness marks quickly. Oh God. Yeah, as well as establishing we've got rid of it off the left-hand side because it can't be there. They were advocating that's what it looks like from the right angle. This is a picture I've selected. I managed to find one that's exactly from the angle, the perspective of St. Bees, not just any odd one. This is what they're claiming it is. I mean, it's just Jesus Christ. That is what they're claiming is a representation of that. Immediately, obviously, there's a color desaturation, so you're not going to get that. But it's not even remotely. There's no solid white here. The top of it seems to be white, not black, which you expect to see the black bit, or at least yellow, or not white. The holes, it's clearly just a series of blobs. There's no continuous white area. There's no black bits. It's just clearly the background. And what I did is I got that image and I've processed this image here to pixelate it and to desaturate it and blur it. So that is that's actually work. And even then you'd be reluctant to say that's the image in question. But that's at least compatible. That bears no relation to it at all. So even on the grounds of visually, your thing. Oh right, finally, okay, I think it's just about near the end. I've now identified. Let's quickly identify all the objects in the panorama. That's Clay Head on the left-hand side. That's this white blob that they claimed was the Langness White House is a house on Clayhead Road at that coordinates. Doesn't seem to have a name. That's the 4 blobs, which is Bruce Farm. This is Baldrine that's hidden underneath it. Ballaberg is also hidden. This is Bala Canal. Laxley is underneath that and hidden. This is Ballarag. This is the one place that they did get right. It's very difficult to get that one wrong because also Ranty, because he chose his particular point of perspective, it actually agreed on that point, so that's why he got that right. I even identified this one blob here as being Rene Farm. I think I didn't have time to go and check it. I got the coordinates, and I didn't have time to go and do a conversion to find out whether that was correct, whether it's called Rene Farm or not. This is Glen Mona, which I showed earlier. Morgold Lighthouse is down there. It's Port a Villain, whatever the hell that is. Belleur is here. And this is something they were getting completely wrong. Well, people keep on pointing to where Ramsey is. That's where Ramsey Dock is. This is where Kirk Andreas is. Regaby. Shellag Point there is those hills. There's an antenna just here. Andreas, Bride, and that's Kranstall, which is actually slightly off. So indeed, there we are. That was why that Kranstall was slightly off. I was referring to off the edge there. Right. So that's a full identification of everything in the image. Every single thing of consequence. Well, I'm not sure I could add some other things, but that was good enough. And I was going to draw in all the points on here with showing how the refraction lines work to scale. Because again, this is this image of mine. This is the thing I was trying to build up. I was going to put all the points in here, but that didn't have time. And that's the end. Thank you. What if Alex is still awake?
Holy shit. The amount of work that you've put into this presentation is enormous. I never would have thought you had put this amount of work into it. Like, we're now at almost 3 hours. And I think you could continue talking about this for another 3 hours. So, nice work.
Alex has left me. Oh, dear.
All right. To be honest, I'm pretty tired. It's 2 a.m. over here. So I don't really want this hangout to be open for much longer. So I've noted a few questions over time that we can briefly discuss.
Come on.
Is everything all right?
Oh, God, sorry. My sound had gone off.
All right. So I just repeated.
Sorry.
First of all,
come.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. So again, the amount of work you've put into this was absolutely astounding, and I have to tell you that I'm actually quite tired now. It's 2 a.m. over here, so I would like to bring this to a quick end. But before we do that, there are a few small questions that were asked by people in the chat, so we can go through these a little bit.
Okay.
So just a quick one in the beginning. Are you going to make the presentation public, like the document that you've shown? Is that possible to upload this somewhere? So people are actually interested in getting it.
I could do, I suppose. Yeah, I'd have to process it a bit, but yeah, it's in a Zara document format, so it's not.
Yeah, that was what I was suspecting. It's a weird format, so maybe if you convert it to PDF or
I could convert it to PDF, couldn't I? Yeah, there is a PDF export, I think, on it.
All right, it would be nice if you could upload it. I'd obviously link it in the description.
Yeah, that'll take some time to put it in that format.
Yeah, because I think this is so valuable that uploading it makes complete sense. Second of all, a guy called WOZ asked, how can Riley's video be taken scientifically? It's just a holiday photo with no data on atmospheric conditions, distance, etc. I'd actually like to answer this question. Although we don't know the atmospheric conditions on that day, the angles, like the headings, don't really get affected by that whatsoever. So to actually find headings for individual buildings to predict which building is which feature on the photo, this photo is perfectly valid.
Yeah, I agree with that. All we need is a photo. We don't need to, we can work out the well, we can see if it works, if it's compatible with the standard refraction case, and it very nearly is exactly compatible. So we don't need to know what the temperature is, the pressure. We can see that it actually works almost perfectly with standard refraction. Just slightly, it's just a tiny bit more. So fine, you know, it's compatible. We don't need to do anything except we can see that the models all cohere. So yeah, it's fine.
All right. So another question by a guy called Helsoy. He wants to know. I guess you've already seen it in the side chat.
No,
I haven't seen anything. Okay.
I haven't seen anything.
He wants to know how it feels for you to know that 99% of the work that you've done will go over Nathan and Riley's head, and you won't be able to understand it whatsoever.
I think they might be able to. I put in some bits I think they will understand, things like the knife flicking and the arrow going up. That's why I put in the sort of stupid bits, so that they can understand that. And then obviously for the more intelligent people, i.e. the globals, understand it. But more, I don't really care. I mean, obviously there's a sort of neutral audience I'm talking to, but also it's my own. There's some technical things I was enjoying doing, particularly that last bit, and I was trying to do some other sort of maths calculations and things. And unfortunately, some of the stuff I had done previously for old, I'd prepared things like the spherical geometry stuff I'd done before. So no, it doesn't make any impact on me at all. I mean, we know he's stupid, but I think possibly the body of evidence may affect him some way. I say some of the simpler explanations and the fact that I've identified, I mean, I have presented a final image, a panorama with all the things identified in it. So there are some very simple elements to it that I think he can get to grips with. Obviously, all the maths, a bit of trigonometry, he won't be able to. But that doesn't really worry me. I was more for my own sense of achieving something there, because I'm also practicing some of my math skills and things and graphic skills I wanted to practice. So that's the reason why I put the effort in, not for their benefit, but for mine.
All right. A question from a guy called RC227. This is actually directed to me. But the question is, what did you, the Rumpus, teach me tonight? Actually, I've known most of the stuff. The only thing that I never was sure was the calculation how to derive the hidden value. But I think I could now do it. As I've never thought about tearing this triangle into two pieces, as Rumpus was showing it. And a guy called Fritz Meyer wants to know how much you paid me to... Wait, how much did Rumpus get for this body of work? No, how much you were paid to actually get this work done?
Me?
Yes.
All for my own education. That's payment enough.
All right. So I think that's more or less it. Any more questions from the side chat? I'll give you maybe 40 seconds or so to type in anything. Obviously, I'm talking about serious questions here. Yeah, there was one earlier. This completely off topic, but somebody wanted to know who your hairstylist is because of your profile picture.
In a bad, I go to a local barber.
Okay.
Gentleman's hairdresser.
All right, then I think that's it. Thank you everybody for watching. Twitbit wants to ask the question. Go ahead. Or did she already ask one? Oh, she already asked one. Yeah, Rumpus, when will you appear on Flat Earth and other hot potatoes?
I could go on there. I haven't bothered to try. I suppose I keep on meaning to have it. Yeah, I like the girly on there. Seems quite nice. Yeah, I keep on meaning to give that a go. But I suppose yeah, okay, I could do that.
All right.
I'm reasonably good at debating. I think I could almost. Well, I couldn't cope with this Nathan's behaviour recently with just stopping me from presenting any information. It got to the point where he was just simply not allowing me to present information.
All right, then let's go ahead with 3 more questions. How is your blood pressure right now?
Jesus Christ, I had a terrible day today. I spent 8 hours. Well up this morning, and I've been in my chair and exercising myself stupidly because and then when I lost that computer thing, I thought I'd lost all of George's stuff, and in the last 2 hours, I'd lost over 2 hours of work today doing that, and I was very, very distressed. I've got a blood pressure machine. I'll go down and check it. It's going to be a bit agitated, yes.
All right. Next question, also a little bit off topic by I'm Rick. Who would win in a wrestling match? Tag team Geostreber and Rumpus versus Ranty and Riley. That depends on what kind of wrestling you're talking about. If you're talking about the American shit, then I would probably lose. But when you're talking about that ancient Greek sport, I might actually win because I actually did that for a few years.
Oh, wow.
When I was earlier, yeah.
Oh,
and then I couldn't anymore because of health problems, and then I got fat and lazy.
I used to be bar manager at my university, and I once took on 4 people in a rugby team, and I came off best. So my wrestling is pretty good.
Okay, so then again, thanks everybody for watching. Next transmission from my side will be probably next Saturday when I will celebrate my 500th subscriber. And I hope I can see you all then again. So, bye guys.